How's it going, folks? Whoa, there's a replay. Hey, is that done? Oh, I got an echo because I got my window open. My mistake. Uh, just wanted to do a little uh, teaser promo about this thing and see if I could drum up any interest in it. So, looking for a talk, not really a TED talk, looking for a conversation. We'll see if anybody hooks up and says anything. Um, we'll go from there. So, as soon as I can hit the button to share down here. Hey, how's it going, folks? Pardon me while I try to figure out how to do this. Well, anyway, so William Blake, if you're unfamiliar, um, uh, yeah, it's cold. Yeah, um, yeah. William Blake is a famous author from the 18th century, otherwise known as the 1700s, late 1700s, um, and he has kind of a connection, kind of, well, more than kind of a connection to RPGs in the form of Paracosm. For anybody who's unfamiliar with the term, it's actually technically a psychologist term, and it's just the big, medical or whatever way of saying make believe world, but not just any believe world. A paracosm is one that's fully fleshed out, has you know uh, all the operations going within. It's not just uh, just some place that you and your friends hang out with. It has structure and function and um, details and NPCs and stuff like that. So Blake's isn't technically a paracosm. It's kind of paracosm adjacent. What he did is make a world out of his mind. He tried to organize his thoughts on certain things, religion, morality, politics, and such, into a kind of universe with different sections and uh, disciplines and fictional deity-like elements um, that were in control of those. So it's kind of a precursor to the RPG campaign world, um, and it has a connection to a more accurate and likely the original RPG campaign world done by a young man um, that was the son of a very close friend of William Blake's called Thomas Malkin. So, what I did with Blake is I just kind of explain a little bit about the details. Um, he was building this whole setting, Blake, that is, um, in the late 1700s. Now, there was no map like we have with a hexes or anything like that. What I call what he had is more of a myth engine. There was factions, gods, as I said, and its own internal politics. I believe the internal politics were meant to represent the sometimes contradictory thoughts that you have. Um, Probably not the best example, but have you ever seen, when you've got the little devil on one shoulder and the little angel on the other, and they're arguing, that kind of thing? Um, but it really does end up being very RPG like. He didn't just write the poems that the poems came from. A lot of them came from this mythology. So let's see who's in here. Everybody's just seeing it on YouTube. No, he wasn't a chef. He was he was a poet and an author. So uh, so it was a consistent world with recurring characters. It even had rules, not so much game rules per se, but just rules. Let's see if I can get anybody else to show up here. Anybody going to come? I'm going to try to get this thing shared out. Keep hitting the wrong. Okay. I don't know what I got to do. This. Pardon me while I try to get people to see this. Well, anyway, I guess that's not going to work. I wonder if I can invite people. Ah, anyway, okay, guess not. Maybe they'll come. Anyway, um, the setting was like his, well, Bible in a way, the Bible of the way he thought, not Christian Bible per se. So it was an interconnected myth system. There were several sections. There was Albion, Urizen, Los, and Etheramon. Um, these were the rulers of the worlds, kind of the deities, if you will. They all had relationships, grudges, and agendas. Think of it as like, as I said, like a Bible where the NPCs are cosmic archetypes, and every story is another session log, just like in RPG. Um, so, as most people think of a setting as a map, in the case of Blake, it was more about the conflict within his mind, and conflict of different people's perspectives and thoughts brought into um, being represented as a kind of its own universe. Um, it was kind of a pressure cooker. He had the two polar opposites in different disciplines of thought: order versus imagination, law versus creativity, um, spiritual freedom versus mental discipline, stuff like that. So um, probably the most interesting part is for RPG people, is Blake's world did have rules. They weren't rules like D&D hit points or something like that. They were metaphysical rules. What happens when reason dominates? The world hardens. What happens when imagination ignites? Reality bends. In RPG terms, uh, his designing had its own set of specific physics. Um, the deeper rules behind what can happen and why um, were part of that rule set. Um, so Blake had a kind of system for creating this, and he did it in what he called three moves. Move one was to create 4 to 6 powers, not kingdoms. Make each power stand for something of value, such as sin or fear. Move two, make relationships. Um, who hates who needs who, kind of a an outline of things. If you ever looked at what's her name, the one that Harry Potter chick, suddenly old man draws a blank on her name, but she showed how she came up with parts of her story, and it was very similar in that she had a kind of a diagram of characters and their different relations and conflicts with one another. She would draw the character, put a box around it, and then draw lines as to whom was connected to whom, uh, and how. How was Harry connected to Dumbledore or something like that, if you're familiar with it. But you can take that example and apply it to any system or excuse me, video that you're um, in with. Yeah, glad you can see me. I'm in the camera here. So I don't have any other viewers other than you. So I'm just going through this for the motions. But anyway, so what I was thinking of doing with this is, if anybody ever showed up, was to show them how this turned into a kind of a template for an RPG system. But I don't know that I'm going to capture anybody this late at night, and even paying a ridiculous sum of money monthly to Twitter, nobody sees me. They stifle me. I won't be paying them much longer. What a waste. So yeah, nobody sees this. Well, anyway, but what I was doing was just trying to give a template on to how you could make an interesting metaphysical system as opposed to a physical one. So kind of an idea there. It's a free download, but of course you won't get it for free if you don't come in and listen to me, and that's not happening, unsurprisingly. So, oh well. Somebody else in here now? Nope. No, nobody's going to see it. That's a shame. All right. So, what else? Let's move on. Sorry, I'm just kind of floundering while I click on things. Just hoping I could get somebody to see it, but I guess that's just not going to happen. So, all righty. So here was one of the ideas that came. Well, let's just go through the whole thing. If you want your, I kind of lost my place being all floundery. And well, ain't nobody watching anyway. See if there's anybody on Twitter watching. So what else is new? Maybe we'll play a game or something instead. Hey, you still play Lotro? There ain't nobody on Twitter either. Shit. Kind of boring. Oh, now there's a bunch of people. It's just people seeing me on Twitter. They ain't trying to know. Well, I'm not. I mean, I'm kind of floundering, so I don't think I will put this out. But I just thought I'd get some people in there and see what they thought about the thing and all that. I have a full lecture that I'll. Uh, lecture isn't really the right word, but I have a full one that I'll put out on YouTube and they can watch later. Just thought I'd go live. One of the things I want to start doing is going live on TikTok, but I got to figure out how to do it. So YouTube isn't really any nicer to me about all these social media do is they suppress you. They want very specific things that will make them money, and they want you to promote things that you know. If I did a video about the latest movie coming out, then they might push me a little bit more because then they stand to make some money. But you know, this stuff they don't give a shit about. Yeah, I didn't think so. Neither have I, because she doesn't play anymore, and she didn't even want to pay for it. So fuck it, we lost that. So I just kind of deleted it. It's too bad. I enjoyed it, but I can't afford to play for it. So anyway, and I kind of told her to take a leap. So I don't think she'll be paying for it anymore. So, but anyway, I did make this little thing up and put it on here. So, see if I can get it to work. Made this little thing. Blake World Engine template. So, it's kind of a starting point I was going to give away for people, but it helps if you actually listen to the storyline here. Yeah. Nobody coming. Let's see how many people actually are seeing me on YouTube right now. It's probably one. Come on. Yeah, they don't show me to anybody. Completely pointless. They will not show me to anybody. Oh well. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Well, what else? I guess this is how to steal this freaking. Okay. What's the next thing? So we've already gone through relationships. The next thing would be there's nothing really left. Anyway, the whole point was is this was just kind of a lead in. Blake's mythology um, was used as a way for him to manufacture. Well, manufacture doesn't sounds a little sterile, but he used the little world, the mythological world that he made up as a wellspring to draw ideas to write poems and stories and stuff out of. I don't. Well, no, you can't pay YouTube to show you to people. You can pay some of these other places to show it to you, but they're really ridiculous. X is the most ridiculous, of course, because Elon's such a POS. But um, I went and looked at what Elon wanted just to show it to a few people, and it was $500. Now, if I go to TikTok, they don't charge that much. They charge like $18 for I don't know, a few. Well, they claim a few thousand views. But here's the problem with paying for that: the views you get may be views from people that don't give one shit. It's not like it's only people who want RPG will see what they'll just show it to everybody. And it won't help at all. It's just a waste of money because if it's something nobody gives a shit about, they'll just click you off or mute you or whatever. So they're just these social media platforms are not they're they're no help at all. So it was better back in the days when all you had was your website. You tried to get people to your website because once they got there, then all they saw was your stuff. You know, they'd shop and buy or shop and leave. But here you've got to beg for attention while the very system that's letting you post your message is doing everything they can to shut you up and keep you away from people's eyes. So the whole thing's a big racket. I paid for it for a while because I'm dumb. Well, to be fair, at first, you think, okay, well, it looks like they're going to help you out. They're going to give you more boost. So you buy the service and find out you're just being ripped off. So, uh, oh well. Yep, yep, yep. Uh, yep, nobody's coming in. Not a damn soul. Mm-mm-mm. Nobody sees it. One second. You know what? Hold on 1 minute. I'm just going to come. I'm just going to. Oh, no, I don't have to go. I can look right here. Yeah. Do I even get. Yeah, let's see. I, I'm checking my dad's phone to see because he subscribed to me. Did I even give you a notification? Okay, it did. It did at least do that. But um, so no, if websites worked, I mean, if it worked the way it used to, and you just had a website, you didn't need any of that crap. And I so, but now you can't get anywhere with any of this stuff. It's pointless. It's a pointless waste of time. Um, So, be better off taking out an ad in the paper. Of course, you wouldn't get anything from that because there's not enough people in one city to be interested. So it doesn't really work. It used to work, and people like when people go, "Oh no, I'm on YouTube and I blah 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 blah." Yeah, you've been on for years and you're grandfathered in, but the new they keep messing with stuff and new people don't get anywhere with it. So, did you hear there? If you look up one of the things that was worse is when YouTube changed the way they do things, it made a lot of people stop making money. Whereas before they were making money on YouTube. One gal was she was making all her money off of YouTube. And when they changed their rules, she stopped making any money off of it. And it completely ruined her because it was her entire income. And she snapped and went into YouTube headquarters in California and started shooting people, which is horrible. Don't do that. I'm not, but that's how significant their rule changes were, that it went from people making enough to, like one guy was bought a house and now you're making nothing. So they just screwed it up. They didn't need people anymore, so they turned that kind of stuff off. So I thought, and let's see, Twitter doesn't, I put something out on Twitter, I pay and I get less stuff, less views than before when they just ruin everything. So let's see. 23 views in 20 minutes. That's one view a minute. That's pointless. There's nothing you could possibly get. It won't work. They just don't want, they're actively suppressing you and they're telling you that you're getting views. Just lying and ripping you off. Pointless. So I just delete the damn Twitter. It's such a time sink and nothing gets done. What a shame. So, you know, oh well, can't get anybody to join. Talking to just pointless. I don't know. Yeah. So, the only thing that helps is if you hit like on the video when you're watching it, but you have to be subscribed, and you kind of like you don't have an actual YouTube like so. I mean, you hitting like won't help, but I have my sister was supposed to help me with that, and she never does it, and you can't get any help, so you just can't get anywhere. Does it. Okay, so well, I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of politics that because NBC and all those Democrat assholes, but They're all the same. YouTube is every bit as they're all awful. You know, you know, get all that political shit, but none of them. They all do the same thing. You can't market anything on any of them. So you don't even have like here's your. Let me show you. Watch this. See how they've got you because you're not really. You don't have a real account. See, it says Bill Jones and then dash. It said something completely different last time you were in. So it doesn't even count you. Like it thinks you're not it thinks you're a robot. It doesn't even it won't give me any credit for you being here because you don't have an actual account. So they just no good. Oh well. Okay, now we got at least got some. Yeah, yeah. They don't have any. But the idea with the thing was is that Robert Blake had actually created his own paracosm, his own mythology, a system that he borrowed from or got inspiration from to create poems and stuff like that. And so I came up with based on his description of how he came to create that stuff. I came up with that, which is just a little sheet that you can fill out to create kind of a foundational um, version for yourself that can be used in creating um, RPG worlds. And then uh, the next thing that I would be talking about um, after Blake, and I was just giving this. This is not you don't have to pay for that. You can download it from a place that I uploaded to. Um, but then we were gonna. The next thing to talk about was again that young man that was a son of a friend of Blake's called Thomas Malkin, and he was a 7-year old child and a prodigy that created a fully functional RPG world that he played in himself. I don't recall exactly what the ailment the young boy had, but he was quite sick, TB or something of the day, you know. Um, so the boy, was inside in his room a lot, convalescing from being sick, trying to. So in order to pass the time and um, being essentially under house arrest because of these ailments, he came up with a very detailed system that was far more detailed even than Blake's. He was really quite a prodigy. The father wrote a book about um, the boy, and I'd love to be able to find it. I forget the title, but I'll put it out there. Um, but it explained in detail um, how Thomas came up with the stuff, the evolution of the paracosm, and some details about it, along with all the other experiences this man had, trying to deal with this son who was essentially condemned at an early life. He didn't live past 7, um, or much past 7 anyway. So, and this was all in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and you can really see how this is the really the origin point of modern paracosms. Now, can you go back in the other thousands of years of human history and maybe find somebody who had done something similar? Perhaps, but documented so far, no. Um, at least not to the degree that something like Malkin had. So, um, his was quite interesting in that realm. And the difference between Blake and Malkin was it was a RPG like realm for Thomas. He played within it, um, usually on his own, but he had uh, reaction charts, just like we have today, so that um, the NPCs of the world would react in a random, unpredictable way instead of just everything being conceived by him. So he started using dice and charts. This young boy. So that was really the dawn of RPG as a game. Was his uh, Paracosm. So we're going to discuss that, and then the next chapter goes into the next group of people that take it, and that would be the Bronte sisters. They were also authors and poets. One of the more famous works out of these, I think there was 3 or 4 of them in total, but 2 of them were really the most prolific authors. And Wuthering Heights, which is a fairly famous novel, was done by one of the Bronte sisters. So they started making several systems for other things. Anyway, uh, using toy soldiers and stuff like that. So, and it was really even closer to RPG. So this is the kind of stuff I was going to talk to for anybody who would listen, but it doesn't look like anybody's ever going to listen, so I'm really not going to bother with it. That's why I turn this stuff on, just to see if I can get anybody to jump, but they don't. They don't want to jump, so it's pointless. Uh, yeah, sorry, just completing this post. Yeah. Well, dude, it's nobody's listening. Just can't get anybody to bite. Maybe play a game or something like that. So what happens is one thing I read about all this stuff is they just another way to make it hard and something that you can't do is now it's all about how fast people reply. Like if I open a live and like 5 or 10 people just show up right away, then I'll get boosted. But if they don't show up right away, then I won't. Well, here's the problem. They won't get the notifications they give out is 20 minutes into the show. I started 20 minutes ago and they finally started telling people, hey, you're showing up. But their metric is how fast people reply. So they're purposefully screwing you by manipulating things. So here's the rules we want you to play by, and here's how you win. And now we're going to violate those rules and assure that you don't win. So they're not helping you at all. They don't, you know, they will own. So it's just kind of the whole thing is really stupid. And I've wasted literally years trying to get people's attention on these things. And between people who are obnoxious and trying to block you, and the politics and all that stuff, people just don't want to help. You know, I got more people trying to shut me up than ever wants to listen to me. So kind of ruins it. Um, but there's just no way that you're going to turn this thing on and people are going to start hitting like, just isn't going to happen. So, um, anyway, but yeah, so that was the idea behind it. But it's, there's, like I say, I'm always better with Q&A, but I can't get any Q's. Fucker. Um, so there won't be any A's if I can't get any Q's. Well, yeah, but you're not a subscriber. It's different. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't count because you don't have a real account. So, yeah. Bum, 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 bum. So somebody was coming in and then they leave, and now it's even taking views away from me on Twitter. So that's the other thing. They manipulate your score and they keep turning me down. So can't win if they rig it. Your score and they keep turning me. Yep. So anyway, you know. But the other thing is too, people just don't have any attention span at all. So um, you don't even have enough time with most of these people uh, to even get your name out. They're so impatient and so um, attention deficit um, disordered that they'll just they'll turn you on and flip you off before they even hear you say. I mean, I can't even get breath in my lungs enough to explain what I'm talking about before they're already flipping it off. And then the platform saying, well, people aren't staying. They're leaving fast enough. Well, sure, shit. What do you want me to do? I mean, you you inform people 20 minutes late, and then you have spasmodics that won't even listen to a sentence before they flip around and flip around and flip around, and then they dock you for that. What are you supposed to do? You can't win. So yeah, but that doesn't at that the problem is the way it's set up. If they just come in 20 minutes late, then it's pointless. You haven't achieved anything. All you're doing is wasting your time. So that's the problem. So people have to come in and they have to reply and they have to ask questions and listen. If they just sit there and lurk or just flip by, then you've wasted your time. So and this one isn't. So one thing you can do a little bit of is promote to some degree, but the problem with promotion is you have to promote on the same platforms that are trying to do everything they can to shut you up. I pay $40 a month and I get less views than I did before Elon ever showed up. And I didn't do very well under Jack because he was also trying to shut you up. So if you can't get people's attention to tell you that you're going to turn on the video to watch it, they'll never come. So you can't win. So, you know, and even when people do come, and I see there was three people for like a split second, I had three people watching, and they don't say nothing. You know, hell, it might even be real. This thing is so inaccurate, you don't even know if they're really there or not. It may just be wrong. So, um, but it's really kind of a waste of time. Um, but if people, people that years ago built up tens of thousands of people, sure, they get some people to watch, a couple hundred views or something like that, but that's it. You know, I watched one guy climb several thousand views in the last year and a half, and he still only gets 50 or 60 people watching this stuff. So it's kind of waste. There's three people listed being here right now. Ain't nobody talking. So I don't, I can't really help. Right. He doesn't do live videos. And that, some people just do it because it's a hobby and they enjoy it. They don't care about the views. And I would prefer not to have to care about them, but I've decided to, promote and sell a product. So I have to be concerned about that. You know, so, and it just doesn't work. Uh, Anyway, there's three people listed in here. If you're one of those three, feel free to speak up. I work better having a conversation. I don't like to sit in front of a podium and preach. I hate that. Oh, yeah, cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, I just put this thing together here. I thought I'd give it out and see if people would use it or how they use it. But I do find myself being extremely frustrated by the lack of, reach. But yeah, it's just a little something to try to, you know, bolster any homebrew worlds that people got. So also, I've gotten a lot of people talking about this kind of origin story stuff about the origin of RPG and role playing games and stuff like that, and they're not right. So I just feel like I want to put out um, a correction. But uh, so I worked on three. They're not very long. Well, I worked on two. I'm about to make the third. Two I made with a co-host, but she isn't really very participatory anymore. So I guess I'll be doing the other one myself. But it goes through the history of tabletop, both RPG and wargaming, and explaining how they come from the same origin point, and that the idea that there's some humongous difference between the two things really isn't all that accurate. Um, the marketing and the terminology kind of split off for a couple of reasons, mostly because of marketing. But at the end of the day, whether you're um, commanding the 48th Panzer Corps uh, in an SPI game, or you're, um, you know, a paladin fighting a dragon or something like that, it's really not all that dissimilar. The only true difference is the the genre and the topics. Obviously, they're different topics, but you're using all the same mechanics. You're all playing a role. Um, you're all trying to achieve goals within a paracosm, even or a fictitious world. Um, and even if that world is meant to pattern something that's historical, it's still a simulated fictional version thereof with with its own physics and its own internal consistency, its own, you know, even if that internal consistency in physics is supposed to be trying to emulate the real world, as far as gravity and stuff like that, which D&D and all these RPGs do. So, just trying to show how the things are the same. Um, but this little system is just quickly whipped up from reading Blake's uh, explanation as to how he arranged his thoughts into this kind of world. And basically, it's a fantasy universe map of his mind, is the way he described it, the way he thinks about contemporary issues of his day. So He also had I believe his first poem ever published was published by his friend and put in the book that his friend wrote about Thomas Malkin, which I mentioned earlier, the young boy who made what I consider to be the very first true RPG um, campaign world. So that was the big Blake connection. And as I say, when then we go to Bronte sisters, and then Robert Louis Stevenson, um, famous for Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, was a big war gamer. And for all the people who are very interested in Braunstein, you'll find that that Stevenson and his stepson were doing that very thing. Um, that would be almost a century after William Blake, circa 1850s, I believe it was, in Switzerland. Um, Robert Louis Stevenson contracted. I've heard people say it was tuberculosis. I think it was just a severe, because I don't believe it killed him. I don't think that TB is what killed him, but don't quote me on that. I have to verify. But either way, he was incredibly ill with a respiratory issue or maybe TB, and he convalesced in a home in Davos, Switzerland. And that convalescence was 2 years trying to recover from this thing. And about a year and a half of that time, he played in the attic of this place um, with his stepson, a very large role play and war game RPG. Now, it wasn't just a bunch of soldiers shooting at each other. Everybody inside that little world was an NPC, including the civilians. And he discusses the dealings in the RPG type of play with the civilians in amongst uh, the military conflict that was going on in the world in the game. Um, Several people wrote about this. One was a fairly famous late 1800s magazine had a big article about this. It was very interesting, and the author of the article uh, traveled to Switzerland to interview um, Stevenson about this, and spent a couple of days playing this game with the boy, um, the stepson, and Stevenson, and discussed the RPG elements of it and put it in the article. So you can see Braunstein before Braunstein, multiple entities in different uh, goals, but in conflict with one another, stuff like that. So it shows the evolution of the whole deal. And then we get into H.G. Wells, which did the same thing. H.G. Wells, he did wargaming. He wrote a book called Little Wars. Then he wrote a second book called Floor Games. And in Floor Games, he discusses a far more RPG type of game. He touched on it in Little Wars, but he got more detailed in it in Floor Games. And it wasn't, just armies versus armies. The RPG game was uh, a a group of explorers travel to a an island that is undiscovered and very King Kong like. Actually, it had human tribal people that lived there. It also had fantasy creatures. Dinosaurs still existed on this island, um, and you played a party of 5 explorers that walked around looking at things, and they had different skills and they had different disciplines. It was very scientific. You were an archaeologist, or you had what do you call it when you're um, anthropological and stuff like that, you know. And then he had a second game, same game, but a second session, where that group came back, and they had different skills and they had different disciplines. It was very scientific. You were an archaeologist, or you had what do you call it when you're anthropological and stuff like that, you know. And then he had a second game, same game, but a second session, where with an armed escort because it was so dangerous. And so then they which kind of those that armed escort functioned like hirelings would to your party in old school RPG. So very interesting stuff. But the idea that this just all manifested in the late 60s out of it, it really doesn't work that way. So we go through that and then we talk about the further connection with RPGs and the mixture between um, RPGs and wargame, and how wargaming is just in of itself just a different form of playing a role. So that is what we're going to put out in video and on YouTube and other places. I've already recorded 2 of the episodes. This is kind of a teaser, um, and then there's other episodes uh, planned if the 3 we do are at all favorable to people. And along with these, I have different sets of rules prepared to distribute to people that watch. This Blake's World engine template is just one. Um, the next thing is that all the articles written about Robert Louis Stevenson and his wargaming gives you a pretty good picture of how they played and the rules that they use. So much so that you can um, piece it together and get a good picture. So what I did was I call this the Jurassic Park way of doing things. Not every detail was written about every portion of Blake's rules, but a good 85 to 90% was there. So what I did was is I took all of that information and filled in the blanks with what would be the closest contemporary that I could find, which would be a British Kriegspiel, British version, um, and and put that in there. So it's like that's why I use Jurassic Park. If you remember that storyline, we fill in the gaps with frog DNA, to make the dinosaur. That's kind of what we did with Blake's. So you have a very Robert Blake-ish war game, and then I give that out as well. So and we have something for each section of it that people can use to play a game or to help make other games, stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're screwing around with, but we're just trying to get people um, to get involved in that kind of really old school stuff, pre 1977, pre D&D stuff that is kind of hidden. Not a lot of people know about it. Another one is this is a little bit more well known with people, at least a lot of people I communicate on Twitter, but some details about Tony Bass Hyboria campaign and things like that. So that was the idea here with the whole thing. And this all leads up. I got my paracosmic convergence coming. Let me get this out of hit all the right buttons, which is hard for me. There. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Ooh, there we go. So there's paracosmic convergence. There's my system, and that's a mock-up of what the book will look like. Hopefully, when we publish it. So, and it uses a lot of these principles from the pre D&D stuff like that. So, the next big deal after that is talking about the influences. One of the things that I got to do at Gen Con myself is listen to these fellas talk. These fellas being Dave and Gary and Cook and Sutherland and a whole bunch of them. And based on their discussions that you hear, not just one-on-one, although I got a brief little one-on-one with Gary, which was amusing more so than informative, but listening to them, talk to groups. There's always forums and things to discuss issues at Gen Con. And based on their own statements and the ages that they are, their influences on gaming should be fairly evident based on what was published when they were um, in their formative years and all that stuff. Guys like Featherstone and Bath and Corey and Charles Grant and Scrooby and a bunch of people that may or may not be known to most RPG people or even wargame people, and just we're kind of discuss um, what they came up with and how the things that they came up with oft times were things that they learned from people even older than them. So it's kind of an echo, it's an evolution, and show where some of the mechanics that you see in D&D uh, actually came from and where they were originally seen and used. Things like Joseph Munchausen III and his roster system and how that applies to D&D. So just those kinds of influences, things like that. So um, it's been very deeply researched. It's unfortunately taken a long time to create because of people's schedules and stuff like that. But we'd love to put it out. But the thing that's disappointing, and if you came in earlier and you're still here and you heard me bitching and moaning, that's why you put a lot of energy behind making this stuff. And then you go and find out that these social media people are just, they're doing everything they can to kibosh you. And it seems, well, what the hell did I do this for? I don't need to be the center of attention. But if you're going to make something that you want to share as information with other people, you kind of want other people to be able to see it. You know what I mean? Um, so, question: I prefer to just having conversations. This is great. So at least somebody's got some for those of us that want. Well, okay. Um, yeah. So. Uh, Yeah. Well, I'll tell you about the history, but it takes, I mean, again, this isn't something that is, this isn't, a PBS documentary length or anything like that. These things run 30 minutes, maybe 45 at the most. Um, but they're already being made. Some of them have already been made. So we'll play them. I just wanted to talk and see if anybody found any of that kind of thing interesting. Any questions, comments, contributions, anything to say, just kind of test the waters because, um, it really doesn't make sense to go through all that kind of effort only to have it not seen by anybody, just kind of echo off the walls. So that's all. But uh, if you're interested in the Robert, I keep wanting to say Robert Blake because I'm a dumb old man that gets shit wrong. William Blake, not Robert Blake's a whole different story. But William Blake, and you want that outline and try to work with it. Uh, I'll be happy to send it on your way. So if there's anybody still watching. I keep saying Robert Blake. Robert Blake was Beretta, but William Blake anyway. Uh, so, what was some of the other things were being said? Oh yeah, so one of the other things that I wanted to address in some of these videos and discussions was there's people out there that are the zero thing because I see people doing that with the origin of these games. Well, Gary said they didn't make a game. Oh, is that what Gary said? Okay. That's not what Gary said. That's right. That's right. There is a Robert Blake that was an author. That's right. But I'm talking about William Blake, the old poet from the 1700s. But yeah, that's right. There was a guy, Robert Blake. Yeah. And then Beretta, the guy who I think he got off. It turned, didn't he get eventually get acquitted of that? But he was accused of murdering his wife or whatever that guy. Yeah, Beretta. But yeah, William Blake, the author. So yeah, but so we go into Kriegspiel, um, because that's a whole. Well, I don't get too deep into it, but Kriegspiel is something that's often misunderstood by RPG people too. Um, Paradise Lost. I was trying to. Among Blake's inspirations was John Milton's Paradise Lost. Yeah, um, that was the book that associates as opposed to the TV show Beretta, Paradise Lost, stuff like that. But yeah, we talk a little bit about Kriegspiel because Kriegspiel's got its own set of things. Really interesting thing about Kriegspiel is that um, uh, everything is really comes out of things like Malkin, uh, Brontes, and Kriegspiel, which all occurred generally around the same time. The Bronte sisters started in, I believe, like the 1820s. Um, the first version of Kriegspiel done by old man von Reiswitz, the father, was 1812ish, stuff like that. And then the kid picked it up a couple decades later and did that. Bill Jones, what is Kriegspiel? Kriegspiel is the German word for war game, and it's a system that was created by Prussian artillery officers. And let's see if we can get that. Have you ever seen this? Show you a set. Spiel Berlin. There is one set left that I'm aware of. Yeah, let's see if we can get these to show up on the screen for you. They might not be very easy to see because of resolution and size, but we'll give it a shot. Let's see. Where is it? It's going to give me grief. Okay, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat. All right, how about now? Just had to hit all the right buttons. Okay, well, we'll do the nuclear option then. Okay. So let's see how this shows up on your screen. How well does that look? Oh, I got to keep there. Okay. Can you see that pretty well? It's not a very good picture. The lighting is pretty poor, but if you can see it well, um, this is a war game. This is a war game that was created called Kriegspiel. The little sections on the upper left of the screen, those are modular terrain pieces. They're just like the kind of thing. Now, granted, they're not hexes, but otherwise, they look like the kind of thing that miniature gamers use today. As far as terrain, they're carved out. They have relief, topography, things like that. Um, you'll see little chits and markers, and if your eyes are real good or your screen is good, way in the back on the left side, you can see some dice that were used. Also, you can see measure devices, compasses, um, and the rules laid out there in the book. Here's some more of it. Here's the shelf that came with it. You get a little bit of a better look at some of the terrain. You can see more terrain housed in the printer's drawers, and lots more units, uh, little markers for troops and such. I don't know if there's, I think that might be the only two pictures that they've got. Um, so it's not the best, but that was the system. And it was a role play and war game uh, training tool for the Prussian army. So that's really kind of the origin point of all this. Now, Von Reiswitz said one of the things that inspired him to start on this was watching young uh, boys uh, playing with toy soldiers, and worked on the system. Him and his son worked on the system over a couple of decades to get it perfected. It eventually became something that was used by the Prussian military. They sold it to the prince, who was elated with it and had many copies made, and it was used to train new officers in the Prussian army. Over the years, it got observed by visitors and picked up by both the French and the British. The British wrote several different sets based on Kriegspiel, had their own version of Kriegspiel, and then the French got a hold of it as well. But and that brought it over to the Americans in the mid 19th century as well, and there was an American version of Kriegspiel. Now, if you have watched um, the D&D documentaries on history and such, you'll be familiar with the term strategos, which is uh, a system that is derived from Kriegspiel. What strategos was, and I don't know how well or how much, I shouldn't say well, but I don't know how much of this Griffith or the other fella, touched upon, but strategos was a uh, translation of Kriegspiel into English, and then some modifications made as those men worked with those men being the originator. I again, old man forgets name, but there was some other people that picked up on Kriegspiel and Strategos and toyed with it. So there's different variants and stuff of it, but but it originally started with translating um, Kriegspiel out of German in a library in Northern Illinois or something like that. Something to be aware of. At that period of time in America, in Northern Illinois and all over uh, Wisconsin, there were German immigrants. It's a very heavily German settled area. Um, Way up into the First World War, Wisconsin, for example, this seems like a sidebar, but just bear with me. Um, was so German that 2/3 of the state legislators spoke German as a first language as opposed to English. And that's why you find a lot of German books in the 19th century in Chicago that require translation into English because of that situation. So that's what he got, and he made Strategos. But it's just another variant of Kriegspiel. Now the big contentious point with a lot of people is, well, that's wargaming and RPG splintered and yada yada yada. Well, that's all about American marketing. But at its heart, you're all doing the same thing using, if you page through the original Kriegspiel, it not only do the physical pieces look like modern wargaming, aside from the fact that it's written in old German, um, it looks like every war game set of rules from the late 70s, early 80s. Little pamphlet with rules descriptions, and here's the movement rates for the different troops, and here's the probabilities to hit. And I mean, it's identical. Um, and then you go into the Bronte sisters, uh, who were playing with toy soldiers, created an entire um, kind of continent, and had not only games with it and warfare, but RPG. Now, if you find that don't I don't want to get into the all the social stuff, but kind of chick RPG stuff. Their stories tended to be more like uh, Dallas, or Knots Landing or something like that. If you're old enough to remember those, you know, primetime soap operas of the 80s, kind of more chick flick stuff about that kind of confrontation. Things that were going on at home while the boys were at the front fighting the war. But they were also fighting the war with their toy soldiers. For some reason they were gifted toy soldiers, even though they were four girls. Um, and they really are the ones that took uh, things to the level of gaming, um, in a Paracosm. So we talk about that sort of stuff. That's what the larger videos do, and they discuss a concept called imaginations, and imaginations are the things that people like Tony Bath and Peter Cushing and Don Featherstone, other people like that, used to play with quite a bit. And that is world imaginations is world building, and it is RPG creation. Imaginations, you would have your own language. Oh, another great example is C.S. Lewis, which you'd have your own language, you'd have your own traditions, maybe even your own religion. The soldiers in imaginations would be fictitious, so they would have their own colors and their own uniforms and their own military traditions and their own organization, things like that. So each player would come up with their nation and uh, give all those details, how they were governed, whether they're a dictatorship or a democracy or something like that. And then that nation would be butted up adjacent to your opponent's nation that they created, and then you would have these campaigns against each other. But they were not strictly military. Everybody in those imaginations would be role played, all the civilian decision making, so you could have full on RPG adventures within these things as the war is going on. So that's what we will be creating um, once we're finished with this. We've already created a bunch of them, but that will be the product, imaginations, and they will be from all different genres, ancient and um, you know the industrial age, fantasy, low fantasy, high fantasy, whatever, modern, sci-fi, anywhere you want to go. Some of them will just be horror, stuff like that. We have an entire county that we've made that is nothing but a horror setting. It has one very Midwestern, mostly small towns, one moderate town that has more than just, a gas station and a church. But it's all very supernatural, call the Cthulhu type of stuff that we're putting out. So um, I've been making this stuff while I him and haw about ever being able to sell it or anything like that, but I just kept on doing it anyway. So that's the kind of stuff that we intend to put out along with this, and that will be um, some of the things that you can use the paracosmic convergence that you see on the screen system to play out. Um, you don't need it. Some of these will be what do they call? They say it system agnostic, so you can apply it to whatever you want. But some of them will work with paracosmic convergence. It's a pretty good system. I like it. I'm glad I came up with it. I've been lacking in confidence in selling it because everybody gets up in a twist with the AI, and I can't afford a lot of art. So we'll see where it goes. But it works pretty well for that sort of stuff. So uh, the amount that we have with Paracosmic right now is at 73. Not all of the 73 worlds that we have with Paracosmic are fully fleshed out, but they are foundationally sound and something that DMs can take with minimal input effort to flesh out to make a full world for people to play in. So we also have a map of the 73 worlds as a kind of galaxy and means to travel between them and connect them. So we're not selling just a game system. We're selling a lot more than that. This is a gigantic project filled with um, more material than any one person could ever play. So lots of options and lots of different places to go and lots of ways to take it. But um, so that's kind of the two pronged assault. One is just discussing the history and explaining it in a little bit more depth with some corrections, and the other part is the products that we're selling. Anybody out there? I see we've caught up and got a few people. Um, well, we still have three in YouTube, but anybody have any questions, comments, anything to say? Another thing that I've done, uh, if you've been here the whole time and heard me, as I said, complaining about social media, I do have a workaround, at least for myself. But it requires everybody else's participation too, or at least other people's participation. It's an old forum. It's free. It's free to me to host, and it's free to you to join. It's called, let's put this up. It's called Pro Boards. It's old school forum. And I'm putting this up because I see more people doing the same kind of, discussions about social media, algorithm suppression, and just having to burn through all the political and nonsensical BS. And I admit that I should have more discipline in keeping myself off of those topics, but they sure do a good job of keeping them right in your face and getting you angry about it. But one way or the other, this can you see this okay? Let's make, yeah, okay. This is the old forum system. So uh yeah, there's banners on top. Oh well. Yeah, there's banners on bottom, but they're not going to bother you. They're not really in your way when you communicate on the system. Um, just a couple of tests, see, you don't see anything like that. Um, it does a couple of things that are beneficial. As you see here, you can do a poll, you can bookmark, you can create a thread, you could even post video links, you can post pictures. You don't have, I mean, there's a character limit, but it's nowhere as small as Twitter is for free. And there's no algorithmic suppression. There's no content that you don't want to see or anything like that. And instead of maybe only a handful of people that you want to address actually seeing what you're posting, everybody who wants to look at the subject and is involved in the subject will see it on the forum. So it's a tremendous workaround from social media. We, it's not about money. There's no, what am I doing? What button did I always pressing the wrong buttons? It's not about money. We don't make any money. Pro Boards does with the ads. You know, um, that doesn't look good. Which one looks good? There we go. Um, but you just get through, pardon my French, all the bullshit. There's a lot of that on social media. There's a lot of noise that you can't filter out, no matter how many settings you push. So this way, we can just get right back to it. The golden age of internet discourse, IMO, was when it was all the forums. The old BBSs were hard for people. If you use BBS back in the day before CompuServe or anything like that, sure, a lot of people used to, but you really had to be a hardcore geek. That wasn't really a very open to the public type of thing, where forums started to be used by everybody. If you remember Dragon's Foot for RPG, Gary was on that for years, and he, just before he died, he had all sorts of interesting posts and stuff like that. It was really good for conversation. And so we've opened that up. In hopes that people will join in and participate, and that way we can just have a better conversation with more people involved, more interesting topics and stuff like that. They won't. I had an account years ago and I forgot what it was and all that crap. So uh, I still have a what do you call it, pending. Nobody has ever approved me. I don't know if they know me and I have a bad rep or what happened, but I It's been months, and I've been waiting for the approval to join so I can get back at it. So that's great to know that people are still using it. I thought I was just looking at archives anyway, but um, I think that's a great alternative. It's just getting very frustrating. So, and I don't want to get people into politics too deep because this is, but it, it's only going to get worse. No matter where you're thinking as far as your politics, the shit going on today in the midterms, you know what I mean? So, uh, it'd just be great to get around it. So, and now that we have the ability to have video and all that, we can, you can embed video. I'm sure there's a limit, and there's probably a video limit that may be a little bit more strict than something like Twitter or Instagram. Maybe. I think that's a trade-off that's okay given the benefits that gives. And again, nobody's got a hand out for money. Yeah, it's not a hustle. It's a it's like all those things were. Password, email registration, activate, free, easy. Oh, okay. I'll try to do that. Yeah. He must have just so yeah, that'd be great. So I get on that one too. But I've got this one and we talk, I'll add some more to it. I put this thing together and I admit to being easily frustrated and so I didn't really I go, oh, no one's watching, so I gave up on it. But I do have it here. We got um having to put this overall topic on, I don't know if you're not even looking at it. Well, I forgot to do this thing, but I've got Dungeons and Dragons, I've got BattleTech, I've got old SSI games, and I can add in even more topics and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be just D&D. It can be all sorts of stuff because I like to talk about the retro games and all that shit. So um, the old Commodore 64 stuff. I saw you put out, Bob, the uh, what was it? Apache, the Temple of Apache, if I'm saying that right. I don't even know if I pronounce that right, but I remember that game. And then they made like the two sequels about 5 or 6 years later. I don't know if they were as good, but at one point you could buy all three in a bundle. Yeah, yeah, that was a good one. I had the old Dungeons and Dragons. God, did I have to put the bite on my old man for Christmas to get that one? $40 for a game. I remember him just freaking out because that one was like $10 more expensive than all the other Tandy games at the time. Yeah, Ultima was another one. Yep. Yep. Everybody, I remember when that came out, I had a buddy who was way into that one. Ultima Online. They used to have whole banks of computers doing Ultima Online at Gen Con. There was a whole section doing that. They added computers like 86 or 87. They had a whole computer section, and that was one of the things they were playing a lot of at the time. Um, there was yeah. So trying to think of some of the other old RP. Well, there's Wizardry and all that. I remember I played a friend who had a leading edge. I always thought those were pretty, sharp computers, and he had all the Wizardry titles. So we'd play that over at his place on that thing. Yeah. So we have a little retro game section, CRPGs and stuff like that. So that's the other thing. You don't have to search, and you don't have to scrape around and wait for the post to come. I've been watching. I did pay for the full Twitter because they had a deal. It hasn't helped me one bit, but it does have this thing called Radar, which is sort of interesting. What you can do is you can put in hashtags or subject matter, and the thing will go out and tell you how many posts per day um, have that hashtag or that keyword that you put in. And I've been watching TTRPG, and it's the average is about 200, you know. And then I went and looked up how many posts per day, most people get fed, based on the 2.5 to 3 hours that the average American spends on social media and stuff like that. You're getting it's like 90-10 in favor of shit you didn't even want to see in the first place. So you go to you go to a forum, 100% the topic you're looking for. Jesus, I need new glasses. Look at me having a still struggle to read. Oh yeah, was that like a okay? Was that like a? I'll read it for everybody else. I remember it be. Oh, you guys can all see that. What the hell am I talking about? I have to read it like a cue card. Was that like a mush or a mud or whatever? Yeah, I know they did a lot of that stuff. I did one on IRC some years later, one of those mush things or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. You guys remember Flying Buffalo? I don't know if you're how old everybody, but Flying Buffalo from like the 70s, that company, um, Flying Buffalo was they made print games and they did online games, but they did it way back, way back. They were out of like Scottsdale, Arizona, and they did play by I kind of play by email, and they did all the computations and everything. They ran it on a yeah, they did Tunnels and Trolls, and they did all those electronic play by email stuff on that old mainframe that they bought from some. I forgot where they got that thing, but they had this big mainframe, and they would run all these sorts of games. They had a fantasy RPG. It wasn't Tunnels and Trolls. It was something else on the mainframe. They had a big World War II game. They had a big World War III game. That was a giant one. They played hundreds of those. I talked to the people that ran that, and I read some stuff, and it said that the World War III game, they ran 800 games between like 1974 or 5 and 1983 or 4, something like that. Yeah, well, play by email. Somebody's asking what play by email was. There was play by mail that was started in the 50s and 60s. This, through Avalon Hill General was the first time I saw something mentioning play by mail. And what you would do is there was some procedures to it, but I think they used photographs at some point in some cases. Other than that, they would use drawings, or they would use hex numbers and say, like, if you're if the chit of your tank had a number system, a lot of games did, like Panzerblitz, for example. Everybody had a pix ID under your chit, so you would say pix ID number 434 on hex A65. You'd have all these. It was like playing chess when you give out the algebraic, you know, queen's rook to e5 and all that stuff. It was kind of like that. It was pretty complicated, but it was the best you could do. And then you would mail that off to somebody, snail mail. That was the way they did in 50s, 60s. Some people would do it over the phone, but back then, long distance calls were were a pretty hefty price tag, so you really had to be well-to-do to do that sort of stuff. And then they came up with the idea of play by picture, where they would take a photograph. But even at that point, that was in the early 60s, and you had to develop those photographs, so it was really a difficult thing. But when play by email, or when email came along, you started doing it that way, where you would take your turn on your machine, and the PC would make a file based on the moves you made and all the graphics that it need. And you would take that file and you would attach it to an email and send it to your opponent. The opponent would load that file into their version of the game, or their copy of the game more accurately, and it would play out the thing. And then you would make your moves and send it back and forth. And that was play by email. And they were doing that play by mail, where they would send it into the company, the Flying Buffalo company, and they would run the game on these old mainframe computers that would do all the computations and all the movements and stuff like that. And then they would mail the results back to the players. They had something like 1,400 people doing it concurrently in the 80s. It was some pretty cool stuff. So that was some of the first multiplayer stuff that I ever saw, and I was real young kid. And the reason I got turned on and told about that stuff is I had an uncle who worked for IBM, and he was a real geek. He was a big aeronautics freak, and he was a big computer freak. So he had read about this stuff, in some electronic enthusiast magazine, and told me about it and showed it to me. It were really cool stuff. Yeah, right. So I was thinking that as soon as the instant cameras came out, that must have really made a difference for these guys. But by then, you had ArtNet and all that sort of stuff people started working on and all that. So um, I saw people trying to do wargaming where they got cameras that they put on the table in like 8 or 9 positions around the table, and tried to tried to play remotely a miniatures game with physical miniatures remotely that way. The problem was when they were trying to do this, you were still at like 480 resolution. That potato camera, you'd be Mr. Magoo trying to figure out what the hell you were looking at. And now, the camera resolution is good enough, but shit, you go play tabletop simulator or go play a video game or whatever. But yeah, Flying Buffalo did that. That was one of the first people that did that. There was another cool one. It wasn't they do well. They still do it, and they do it over a website. Um, it was a gladiatorial battle game. They had a computer. It wasn't a mainframe. By the time let's see, what year would this be? 84. So it wasn't a refrigerator, but it was like a dishwasher sized machine, and they brought it into the Great Hall at Gen Con. And so what you do is you'd go and you'd fill out. It was very comedic. You'd fill out a character sheet for a gladiator, and uh, you'd have a little fun with it. It was meant to be, kind of cutesy, so the guy would be a little bit silly or something like that. Anyway, and then um, you'd submit your character, uh, and it was written out on a particular type of paper that they could feed into this thing or something like that. If I remember it right. Maybe they used IBM cards, whatever it was. They would give the information to the machine, and you would fight some opponent, and the machine would calculate it, but it would also give a narrative description. So they would tell you, well, maybe about 3 hours, you know, your your bout will be over. And you went and you took the feed out sheet, the output sheet, and read it. And it was pretty hilarious, things that would happen, like you drop your sword or something like that, funnier things than that. I'm not very imaginative, but I remember laughing pretty hard. But it was a pretty neat system. You could still play it. So I would go and do my usual gaming because I had a fairly full schedule when I go to Gen Con, but I would dash into the hall and quick get my readout and laugh at it, and then set up another character for the next tournament. So yeah, that's pretty cool. That's some of the great old computer stuff that used to be at Gen Con. Yeah. So yeah, all right. Well, and that's another one I'd like to do. Yeah, uh, play by email with Star Trek. I have a big Star Trek campaign set up for RPG, but it's really hard to get people to play. I I will be back to playing, and hopefully I can get some people to do it. Play some of these other games. We've been playing that domain game. Um, my father's funeral is on Wednesday of this week, and after that nightmare is over, then I'll be able to be free and put my time back into that domain game. It was something that was supposed to take my mind off the fact that he was in the condition he was in, and then this hits him. No fun there, but we'll get back to it. I'd love to play some more of that stuff. So, but yeah, I've got the campaign for Star Trek. The thing with the Star Trek campaign is the intention is, and I don't know that I'll ever get anybody to participate in this much of it, but the intention was that you're playing a one shot um, RPG adventure. But if you as the bridge crew don't satisfactorily um, solve the issue in that one shot, it will lead to the a larger conflict that can be played using um, FASA's mass battle system, and have a war where people would play. I would do it, maybe play by post, because I don't think I could get enough people to sit through even an easy version of Star Trek battles. I would love to play the old Starfleet battles with people. And I've seen some people say they would be interested, but most people look at Starfleet battles and go, hell no. It's because that's a pretty complex system. But the FASA version of Starship Battles, the old FASA RPG version, is is really slick and simple and easy. And I would use that. That and the root canal is probably the next thing I'll have to deal with after the funeral with Dad. I've got some bad teeth, and I've put them off pretty long because I didn't want it to interfere with his. First, I was a caregiver to him. I didn't want the tooth thing to interfere with that. And now, unfortunately, I've had to plan for his his service and his burial, and I didn't. So I've let it languish. So I think that I'll probably end up getting that, but maybe I'll get lucky and dodge that bullet. Thank you, folks, for the condolences. It's it was cancer, and it was watching that is the closest thing to hell on earth. At least I've seen a lot of ugly stuff when I was in the service, but nothing matches watching your old your own dad, just vicious disease. So, um, but we'll get back into it. Yeah, been playing the domain. What we're playing, for anybody who's not playing, is we're playing uh, a domain game on the old BECME expert map, the old what was it, E2 or whatever, the known world. So, uh, play by post domain game. Uh, and I guess the interesting thing about the domain game that I'm playing is I tried to keep it really super vague. I didn't want to inundate people with too much lore because it would seem too. I thought it might seem too complicated or whatever like that. And um, because all I hear about is people talking about how everything's all complex and stuff. So anyway, um, I guess I turned it down too low because most people are saying, well, this thing needs a little bit more structure and a little bit more detail and stuff like that. So when we come back, I'll kind of adjust a little bit so it's more a little bit higher resolution without going too far in the other direction. But we'll turn it up a little bit. So um, I guess the biggest problem so far is the timekeeping thing seems to be a little bit confusing for some. And I don't do the real time or the one for one thing, but I do use a kind of elapsed time as opposed to a real like how long does it take you to drive to your local gas station versus how long does it take you to drive to the next town? One's going to take a lot more time to do. So uh, whoever's being sent on a mission that takes a long time to do that's tracked as time goes on. I have sections of time, 4 hours, and that but it may take 8 hours to do something. So in that case, it would take you know two turns. So if you start at you know at 9 a.m., it'll be over at 5 p.m. or something like that. That's how that works. So that way I can coordinate everything. That makes it real easy for everything to happen at the same time without having to go through all sorts of hoops to track it. That's how I work the things. And I have these domain games for all the other stuff. I'm a big Star Wars guy, and I have it for Star Wars. But man, trying to get people into sci-fi these days on Twitter, nobody wants to do it. I love my Star Wars D6. I can't get nobody to play with me. I had people play before. We played for a year and a half back before. I had 5 or 6 people playing it. We had a blast. I love that shit. Anyway, um, but it all works in the same way. As far as the domain play, you can have the war happening and the RPG happening. With something like D&D and BECME, you have diplomats and spies and merchants or something like that may go on their own little um, missions to go create trade routes or go make other military alliances. And if you well, we were talking about computer games. It's a lot like the old Fantasy Empires computer game for D&D made by SSI, where you can send like party members that you hire or that are your underlings to go quest for magic items or something like that. You can go do that, and then you're also building your domain by creating a castle and trying to get tax money and increase your the size of your kingdom and you know create an army and things like that. So it's that mixture of our RPG and wargaming, because I really believe it's all the same thing in the end of the day. So I like to play those kind of mixed deals. And of course you get that kind of what people like to use, that Braunstein term, because everybody's got their own uh, desires. Somebody might want to take over the whole map. Other people might just go, well, I'm building this civilization for and have a different outlook. Maybe I just want to make a lot of money, or I just want to see how long I can run it, or whatever it is. So um, everybody's kind of got their own direction they want to go, and these creates the conflicts. Yeah, the aces and eights is a neat system. I'm always big about going back to the stuff that I played originally because I own it and I like it, and I'll I'll jump on Boot Hill before about anything else. But I agree, Dave, that that if I was going to do something other than Boot Hill, it would definitely be aces and eights, because I just think that's a really slick system. It's kind of fun to play with that combat reticle and all that sort of stuff. I used to like the way they did it with 40K. Remember anybody play 40K when you had the reticle where it was columns and rows, and that told you specifically where you hit the vehicle? I thought that was neat. Most people complained it took too long or whatever, but I just thought it was an interesting way to do aiming and all that. So it's fun. But yeah, I'll do aces and eights. I do have somewhere, I have at least one campaign for a Western. Um, it's not a long one, but I have some narrative story about the old West, but it's nothing mixed up. I've never done, well, I mean, I've done it, but I've never written anything, cowboys and dinosaurs or anything like that. But um, I used to do that sort of stuff. That H.G. Wells stuff kind of turned me onto that. I used to do with Mark's Toy Soldiers, the big ones. They had like cowboys and Indians that were, maybe 2, 3 inches, 2.5, whatever it was, whatever scale that would be, 25 millimeter or whatever. And then they had 32 millimeter that were about this big. And I had a bunch of those, and I did a whole set with that. And then um, I got I got dinosaurs from Dinky or Tommy or one of those other outfits from that age. And they weren't exactly to scale, but that was just the way toy soldiers were. And we played a whole big thing with and I got it from watching some 50s B grade deal where cowboys were shooting it. I forget the name of that movie, but it was one of those kind of Ed Wood like. B grade Saturday matinee movies that people used to watch in the 50s. So I know that's big now, and that's why paracosmic convergence I think might be real popular. Perhaps is that it lends itself very easily. It's set up to be something that can be played where, oh, we're cowboys, but the enemy is, aliens or something like that. Technological differences that seem extreme are, I set it up in a way that it can tolerate all that. Does that mean that it doesn't mean that you can just willy-nilly go after somebody with a gun if you have a short sword, but what it means is you don't have to jump systems or go through a bunch of conversion or anything like that, like a lot of other people do. Like I see people going, well, I want to do horror, but I don't think D&D does horror well. I personally disagree, but okay. So now what you do is you've got to go find some other system, because you've got the hankering to play, I would think most people would go get Call of Cthulhu or whatever, but um, this you don't ever have to switch because I get tired of having to switch around. In fact, as much as I love D6, if I ever got people to, got this system to turn on to people, I would play my Star Wars using my system versus D6 just because um, it's neat not to have to switch gears every time you want to go to a different genre. So it's just done with scaling. It's not super complicated way, but that way you can have any technological era and you could switch from one to the other, even mid game. If you walk through a porthole that takes you to a different time or a different technological level on, it, you don't have to recalibrate. You can just keep on going. Aces and eights, I'd say was the best because everyone was really into it and doing accents and really getting into their, it's another thing. I was just talking about that sort of stuff, and that's fine if you're into it. And I've never been a voice guy. The first time I saw like what people call theater kids, I sat down to play an RPG that was being promoted. I forget the name of it. It didn't last very long. The guy was from Lake Geneva, and he had a little office right on Main Street, Lake Geneva, not really near any D&D stuff, but what they would call downtown. And I went to one of the promos, and everybody at the table but me was Renaissance Fair people that knew each other, and they were in Renaissance Fair. They were in their outfits, and they were doing the Renaissance Fair thing, and that's fine. Good, good. I'm a geek. I got nothing against it, but I walk in with khaki shorts, an Izod t-shirt, boat shoes with no socks. This wasn't my scene, and I was kind of like a little cringe for me because that just doesn't get into it for me. So I think they thankfully were understanding and had somebody to take my place because I don't do that sort of stuff. But if you do it, that's great, and I do like the idea of getting into stuff. I know that one of the fun things about Gen Con was they would hype you up. I used to play a lot of Star Wars at Gen Con, and they'd always, you'd kind of get into it. And I always liked watching BattleTech guys get into it because they would show up with the berets and the the fake medals and stuff like that. So I'm down with that. It's cool. So um, yeah, but I really love to play that system. I don't usually like to try stuff new because I'm kind of Mikey, but that one did look interesting. But yeah, we do all sorts of stuff like that. I got a whole line of games and I'm just looking for people to play. But more than anything, I'd love to take all those games and fold them into my new system so that I don't have to keep opening up different rule books every night. But what else? I think we covered Blake. Got a lot of people in here now. We got four. Not that much. I always think there's more because Twitter tells me there's 21 views, but I don't know what that means because I don't see anybody on my Twitter page looking at my thing, but whatever. Um, But if you want the Blake thing, just let me know. It's a word processing document. It's like 187 kilobytes. It's something real small. I can email it to you, or I can put it up on a uh, Google download page or something like that. Whatever. So, or if you join the forum, there's another thing. The forum um, that I have allows for attachments. I don't know what the limit in size is. I'm sure it's fairly small, but things like you know PDFs and things like that shouldn't be that big of an issue. And that solves a lot of problems for people that want to transfer things but are afraid to click on weird links and stuff like that. So, but yeah, but it's just a different way of approaching world building. So that's all. What else is new with folks? I I'd love to stream and play. I now have the ability to stream and play and see. I think I can see the screen now without having to have a second, the chat on the screen. So I thought I'd do some gaming as soon as I clean out my computer. It's running a little hot because it's not clean. So what else? Do you guys have TikTok? Do you watch what's going on TikTok? I got some really interesting stuff on people talking on TikTok. What was the latest? Oh, this says everybody's gone. I don't know if anybody's still left or not. It says you're all gone. Weird. What were they talking about? Oh yeah, that was the guy that there was people that said that the entire intention of D&D was not a game in the first place. That was the big argument. That was interesting that they cited um, Gary's discussion in Dragon magazine in 1979, talking about the difference between OD&D and AD&D as their justification for stating that Gary once said that he never made a game, that D&D was never intended to be a game. I don't know if you guys remember that article. If you read it, it would have been like June 79. It was number 26. 26? Yeah. I think it was volume 26. That was an interesting conversation. I always thought about sending it to Rob to see what he had to say, but I haven't seen Rob post in a while, and so I figured no. But the whole rule zero versus raw, I guess that gets old and stuff like that. But it was interesting to me to see that people that tend to be of a younger age were discussing that sort of stuff. I don't know. Just looking for topics of conversation. So, oh. Anybody else? Okay, still here, but AFK. All right. I don't know how to read this stuff. On one of my counters, it says there's 4 people watching me. On my other counter, it says there is none. That's I don't know what that means. But trying to think of anything else we've been doing that might be of interest. I've got a lot of videos. Some of them are even good. Some of them, me and my co-host may have been better to look at, but or redo. But we do a lot about the history of the games and stuff. I do have some playthroughs, but I don't know how many people really find that stuff interesting. Is it really interesting to sit and watch or listen to a session of gaming that you're not playing in? I don't know what people really glean from that. Maybe one thing to read like an after action report, maybe, but just to be a spectator in an RPG game seems I don't, but some people say they like to do that, so I have a little bit of that, but I'm not sure if it's worth posting. So I don't know. The only other conversation I've had lately about RPG is about ecology, and I think most people find that pretty effing boring. It's like going back to school, but that was about it. So, what other cool old stuff that we used to do? Flying Buffalo. I think of another old game system. Old game. Uh, who else? Oh, I know an old one. Do you remember? Oh, I forget the name. Jeez. It was an ASCII dungeon crawler. It didn't even have graphics. You could play it on an old pet computer. What the hell was the name of that? That was a fun one. I can't think of the name of it. You guys know what I'm talking about? Uh, anyway, that was one from way back. You like I said, you could play it on a pet. So pets were early 70s, but they were in a lot of schools in the late 70s, and this was a dungeon crawler, an ASCII dungeon crawler. Dungeon Hack. Dungeon Hack. That was the name of it. You guys ever played Dungeon Hack? It was an ASCII. I guess they SSI's got one that's called Dungeon Hack, but that's not what I'm. Am I getting the names wrong? I don't know. I'm so old, I forget this shit now. I thought it was called Dungeon Hack. Yeah. Anyway, how about that? What was that? Zork. There's one. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a good old one too. Real old stuff. Um, there used to be a lot of those. Um, but back in the 70s, you could, and even early 80s, you could go to these mom and pop software stores where they were selling stuff that some guy had written locally, and then they kept doing disc copy, like mass producing that way, and you'd buy it in a plastic bag. And some of a lot of it wasn't any good, but there was some really good titles in there, but they weren't nationally distributed and all that. And there used to be a lot of good kind of RPGs that were uh, largely text based, but kind of a primitive version of Knights of the Old Republic, where they'd say something, what's your reply, A, B, C, or D, or whatever. There's a ton of that stuff back then. Um, but I remember going into those places and they would have racks, and it was just stuff that guys had written, and they were in sandwich bags and stuff like that, before Babbage's or any of that. Um, Yeah, Zork was. Oh, only played it once. Yeah, there was a lot of people playing that. That was a big one for a while. Um, but there was tons of that old stuff. But you'll never, like, it's not something you can go and search out, because it was some guy making a couple extra dollars by writing that and then selling it like on consignment at the local mom and pa store or whatever. Um, But Dungeon Hack was one you could get, like, I think that started maybe on mainframes. Um, I know like the first Star Trek game this was a really neat um, story about uh, um, the U.S. Air Force, there was guys playing a version of a Star Trek computer combat game using the systems that ran um, radar uh, in the mid and late 70s. I forget where I read about that, but I thought that was really cool. Um, Probably, Scientific American or Popular Science or something like that. There used to be a lot of articles about stuff like that. Um, there was a big one that Dungeon Delver showed about. This was some years back about all the computer sys stuff that people made in the 70s, like the random dice roller that wasn't a computer; it was all electronic, like diodes, and it had light bulbs that like 60-watt light bulbs, but they had the gel over them, so they were different colors. This is wild contraption that used to be a random generator that you could build as a kit out of some electronic thing. It's like I said, that's the kind of stuff my uncle would always have. That guy would buy out Radio Shack. He had all the stuff. He had the Telstar. Remember the triangle Telstar? One side had the steering wheel, the other side had the pistol, and you could it had a sports game like a tennis racket or something on the third side. But it was this it was a piece of plastic that was like a pyramid. It was meant to look like it was wood grained. That he would buy all those uh, 70s console games like that. Um, what was the uh, was it Magnavox? Odyssey? What was Odyssey had an RPG too? You guys remember Odyssey? That was like one Magnavox. It was Magnavox was the company. It was called Odyssey, and it was so old that when you got different games, you actually put a plastic sheet over um, your TV screen to make the board look different. But they had one RPG. Um, it was kind of a Lotro-ish thing, if I remember right. It had back then the graphics in these games were so bad that the like the cover art looked better than the graphics. The Quest for the Rings. It was very. I don't think it was um, an official Lord of the Rings product, but it was kind of, obviously geared that way. But that was their RPG. Yeah. Oh yeah. My uncle had all that stuff. He had. I f- There was another one that he had that was kind of an up. It was like Pong or Pong. It was called Pong Two, I think. The original Pong was just a. It had two controllers that just had a dial, and you could pick them up out of a cradle, and then the start and reset button was in between the two cradles. And then you had Pong 2, and that brought in a bunch of it had a light gun, and it had skeet shooting, and then it had um, kind of old west stuff. And basically what it was is back then too, I don't know how they got away with it. I guess IP law may have been different or whatever it was, but they had um, Boot Hill, which was an old arcade game, but they had basically the same game, um, black and white, whereas Boot Hill kind of attempted to be color with gels on the screen. But there was a couple different games with that. One was um, shooting at each other. You were on either side of a covered wagon. You had to shoot through the covered wagon to get at the other guy to hit him. And then there was one that was just quick draw where you had to outdraw the computer guy. And then there was skeet shooting and stuff like that. But then it also had all the Pong stuff where you had the paddle and the, bing, boom, that kind of stuff. And my uncle had all that crap. tons of it. Some of it was really good. Another neat thing that I remember playing as a real young kid was arcade games that weren't digital. Like there was a like a Formula One race car game, but um, it didn't have a screen. It had like a belt that that rolled back and forth, and so the terrain went this way, and then it had cars glued to the belt that you had to dodge, and somehow it knew when you made contact with one. I don't know how it did it. I was too young. And then there was one that was even better. It was called Night Driver, and it was just like, if you remember Night Driver from Atari, it was like that, but it was a real car with a hood, and you steered the car, and it was same deal. You're driving through this um, three-dimensional model that would just move around as you press the accelerator. It was all mechanical. That stuff was really cool. Um, that was like, God, I was just a tiny kid, maybe 8 or 9, maybe. And then a couple years later, I started playing the arcade games. They had Sprint and Dragster and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah, I used to love that stuff. I don't do enough with my retro gaming stuff anymore because somebody told me the more stuff you cover in one account, the worse it is. But now, who cares? How can it get any worse? I barely get any views anyway. Who gives a shit? I might as well start, posting more of that stuff. I got a ton of it. I'm gonna have to start selling some of it, unfortunately. So if anybody's in the market for that stuff, it's coming. Whatever still works. They remade Atari. Did you guys know they remade Atari? It's the same system, and it's not one of those cheesy knockoffs that you got at Toys R Us that you plugged into the yellow and white auxiliary. This is like the actual unit, and it plays the original games. I got boxes of original 2600s, and this thing will play it. Unfortunately, I've had to store my stuff in storage over the winter, so God knows if it'll ever work again. It probably all destroyed by the weather, but I'd love to play it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to buy one of those. Have my own 2600 back. And I have 3 original decks, and I went to a place I said, "I'd like to have these repaired because, you know," and they said, "Bro, just buy the new one. By the time we get done with the labor and the parts on this thing, you've already spent way more than it cost to buy the new version of it." Okay. So anyway, I like both tabletop and PC stuff. So I'd talk about either or console stuff, but um, I prefer to play the tabletop stuff because I can play with other people. Most of that stuff that we're talking about was single player, especially the old RPG stuff um, back in the day. Do you guys anybody read? I put out an article um, about a week ago on one of the first massive multiplayer onlines done by Sega. I got the ability to make articles now, and they don't get any more reach than anything else. But I wrote the thing about that. I always thought it was interesting that one of the first times I saw MMO was on a console and not the PC. And Fantasy Star. So, I didn't play it myself. I didn't have the time or the money, but I thought it was a fascinating thing to have these large multiplayer games. And there was a time when they were talking about doing that. SSI was talking about uh, doing that for military games. What now is called War Thunder. SSI said they were going to do about late 90s. They said they were going to um, combine their tank simulator with their flight simulator, and you were going to be able to play both at the same time in the same space. And then then they collapsed. But I always liked that idea, the massive multiplayer online war game too. The first one that I saw come out was called Blitzkrieg, but it wasn't very good. Everybody didn't like that. My favorite review about Blitzkrieg was that in order to fire the rifle, you had to hit 4 keys at the same time, and one dude said, "I fired a rifle, it's not that hard." You had to you had to contort your fingers to hit all the different keys. Yeah, yeah. What else? That's another thing. Oh, yeah, giant war games. I'd love to run some big BattleTech war games or some big, World War II games or something like that. That's another thing that can be done play by post, on the server. I can do fantasy war games. I've got a whole fantasy skirmish war game that comes with paracosmic convergence that, or is part of the system anyway, that you can do. I'd love to do that too. Anybody ever interested in that? So, oh, another retro gaming thing. Uh, Michael Dale, that's on Twitter, he showed me an emulator for Nintendo Entertainment System, um, that's set up for network play. So you can play an old NES game that was two-player using this emulator online remotely. So the other player can be connected via the internet, like you're playing on the same. That was phenomenal. I thought that's great because I can't get anybody to play games with me like those old games. So I got to dig that out. If anybody ever wants to hook up and play games like that, I would love to do it. I'd love to. There's a bunch of really cool old Nintendo games that would be fun to do like that too. Um, I also play Lotro. Anybody's ever looking for that? So, anything else you want to hear about about gaming history that I've researched, about gaming technique, about ideas for worlds or mechanics or anything like that? Anybody listening that want to hear anything like that? I'm open to talk about anything. Any ideas, questions, comments? No. I remember I got to wait about 10 seconds because there's a fairly long pause between what I say and I got a little bit of lag because of that shit. I do have that. I started that. Yeah, I had this girlfriend that, well, I'll just leave it at I had this girlfriend. Not anymore. And we were playing that kind of stuff. So I did get back into D&D online. I downloaded that thing years ago. And whatever. It just didn't seem like it was that. She didn't like it very much. She wanted to go back to Lotro, but we tried it again, and I see that they had the Keep on the Borderlands section. I was like, ooh, I want to go play that just to see what they did with it. But she wouldn't do it. She wanted to go back to Lotro. She was more comfortable with that, and it looked a little bit better. So um, I don't mind it. I'll play it. It certainly is a little bit uglier than Lotro. I wish you could strafe like you could in Lotro with it, though. Oh, are you? Okay, I'll put a little more break on it. Yeah, the internet, man. I swear, it's almost as if the more bandwidth they say you have, it's like, is lag really supposed to? Why, why isn't it get better? My computer gets faster. My modem's supposed to be faster, but the lag isn't any damn better. What's that about? Um, but yeah, I've got D&D. I do. I have Star Trek Online, which I like to play. Um, but I was doing all this with that girlfriend, and then she went crazy or whatever. So, so now I'm just kind of. Well, what do I do? I don't want to play it alone. But I've got the Old Republic for Star Wars. Pretty much I downloaded all the free stuff off of Steam, Lotro and all that stuff. The Star Trek's okay. I the Old Republic's okay as long as I just keep ignoring the fact that it's supposed to be Star Wars because I was never a big fan of the Old Republic part of Star Wars. Yeah, you can. It's changed. They have what they call, well, they've got raids now, and they can be, they're multiples of three out to 12 people. But even with my fairly new computer, once you start getting 12 people and a couple of rune masters in there, this thing starts to want to tank with the frame rates pretty bad. But four or five people on a regular, I think you can have a six-person party if you're just doing regular questing, but you can go out to 12 or more, I think, on these raids. Um, but yeah, we've just done regular party stuff and it's worked out okay even with my system. So um, that's pretty cool. But the problem is if you're a single, it, trying to you hook up with other people, you get a you don't you get a mix. It's like playing online with playing blind. Are these people going to be cool? Are they going to know what they're doing? You know, how are they, so there's all that. Um, and I think the big problem with Lotro now is that in order to get some of the good gear and to advance, you have to do these raids. And it's really difficult to get a dozen people to play one of those raids at the same. They're not short scenarios, and you have to know what you're doing, or you fail. So nobody wants to take a noob, and you don't know what you're doing until you play it at least once. So it does kind of put a glass ceiling on your head. Yeah. Um, the Lotro I played doesn't allow you to hire anybody, but I'm playing the old one that was the EA games one. I know there's a new version out that's a different Lotro game. They might let you have hirelings. Um, that was the neat. I forget the name of that kind of generic. Well, I call it generic. What was that called? Um, there was one that lets you pick up NPCs like NPCs or hirelings to play with. Uh, can't think of it. Um, the other thing about Lotro now is it's technically free to play. At least the one I'm doing, the Standing Stone one, is technically free to play, but you don't really it's like having the demo version. If you want to play, you've got to subscribe monthly. And that was the other thing. I don't have the cash flow for that. My girlfriend did, so I don't have the subscription anymore. So I think I'd be going back to D&D or the Star Trek or something like that, which is pretty fun. But the and the other thing is we've been playing. I dated this gal for a long time, lived with her almost 20 years, and we started right when EA came out with Lotro. So we've been through it a lot. And what would happen was is we'd get to a certain level and we get tired of it, or the finances would get a little tight and we'd have to stop paying the subscription. And if you stop paying the subscription for long enough, they start deleting your gear, and so we've had to start over three or four times, and it starts to get dull to have to start from ground up again. Right now, I'm at, I think, level 65 or something like that, and I've never really gotten past it because every time we get to that level, we burn out or we run out of cash. Just so I don't think I'll ever get through the damn thing. Oh yeah. Oh, and D&D, the hirelings with D&D. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I went right ahead, and for Christmas I got the Keep on the Borderlands. I don't know how true to D&D, it's going to be with that. But as soon as I saw that was an option, I'm like, I got to go there. Yeah, yeah. And then um, there's been twice where we quit for so long that it actually, like, Standing Stone wasn't the company that it started with when we started. It was EA, and then I forget. It's changed hands several times, and there's been twice over the years where we've quit where it's actually changed hands, and then you come back and you say, hey, where's my stuff? And they go, well, that was the other company and they don't even have it and all that. So I've lost a couple of characters. Then they banned me one time because I used my given Christian name, which is a very German name called Jurgenov, and I didn't. And some dipshit kid that was a moderator banned me for using that as a name for my character. But it was that's actually the name on my birth certificate. I don't go by that because, but oh, good, yeah, I did. I figured it would. There, I was like, well, how bad is this going to be even close to it? But it sounds like it'd be interesting because obviously playing that is the a lot more fun than anything else. So yeah, it was okay. I got to jump back in. That's another thing. I'd love. Well, let's all form a party. I don't know what the maximum is for that game, but we should be able to link up. Maybe we can get a group to do that. That would be fun. It would be nice if they gave it a facelift, though. Just a little bit of one. It really does. It really does look like some early 2000s shit going on there graphically, but um, that's okay. So the combat's okay. It does really seem like it's a couple of steps behind Lotro as far as being up to date with all that sort of stuff. There's a lot more choices for attacks and all that sort of stuff. When I started playing the D&D, it just seemed like all I was doing was hacking, but that's okay. It's At that point, it's just more about going through the content than those details, I think. And I'd love to see a Wild West MMO. I'd love to see some sort of Boot Hill. I don't know if anybody ever do that. Oh, cool. Oh, they're getting into all that, right? Oh, that's cool. Like I downloaded it when it first came out, and it just seemed like kind of a dungeon crawler type of thing, which was okay. But obviously they got to keep expanding and all that, so that sounds fun. That would be cool. We start a little guild or something. Make it a regular deal. If I can't get the tabletop, at least I can you know, get the computer going. Playing some of that would be fun. Um, there's actually the one that um, there's Star Wars Galaxies was an old MMO. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and they had the Star Wars Galaxies, but I always avoided that because I figured that's if there's any game that I would get addicted to, especially at $12 a month or whatever it was originally, so I never did it. But now you can play it for free on some website. They've got this different version or different way of serving it to you, where you can play the old Galaxies, and it would be fun if I get people that want to play Star Wars, because I did it myself and it was just another version of Second Life. Everybody was just sitting in a cantina being kind of goofy lefty people. I didn't see anybody really adventuring. And I was like, this sucks. It's just a freak show of, blue hairs. But but I'd sure love to play that because I love that too. I don't know what server I'm on. I'll have to check that. I think you can transfer. I'll just make another character and catch up if I have to switch servers. That's okay. It's not that hard. Yeah, man, it was, and they were all, you could just leave, like, I listened to them and I'm like, "Oh, Christ, this is blue sky online. Get me out of here." But I thought, well, maybe somebody will want to play sometime and actually walk out of the cantina and do the fights. Um, it was a neat game in the past. I just didn't want to pay the money and get stuck. I would not have the discipline to walk away, because you were actually, at one point they had it set up where you could, the war was going on, the, galactic civil war, and the empire was taking over planets. You could fight whole battles to control planets and stuff like that. I was like, oh wow, that would be great. So, um, but anyway, one of those things. I do have War Thunder, but I don't know if my machine's up to that. But I also would love to play something like that. But I have to play historical. I'm kind of autistic when it comes to war games. I don't want to be playing the way they play World of Tanks, where there's a T-34 and an M1 Abrams in the same battle. That bugs me. It's gotta be, it's gotta be true to form. That's why the War Thunder works better, because they have the historical servers. I don't know if anybody plays that kind of stuff. So I played it a little bit. I'm not very good. Okay. All right. I'll see. Let me see if I can. Oh, those are all the wrong buttons. There we go. Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, maybe sometime we'll get on there. I got tomorrow's preparation, Wednesday's the service, and then finally, we can kind of relax, get over that hump, and then all I have to do is go to the dentist every once in a while for this dumb tooth. But but yeah, I'll take a look at that. Yeah. Uh, I'm a single now. So yeah, that would be fun. But check out, I got a Discord server for any tabletop gaming anybody wants to do. Let's see. I got all my games laid out with that's uh all the information. Let me get the link. There's the link. Linky link. Uh always buttons. There we go. I put that down there in the chat. There's the Discord server. All right. So that's where we're playing the domain games, and I have some other stuff set up there for anytime anybody wants to play. Like I say, I got the Star Wars. If you like Star Wars D6, I'm your guy. I got that coming out of my yin and my yang. I got 5 different campaigns set up for that. I've got all the modules and all the material. I've got printouts for anybody that doesn't have the material, so that you can use the right charts and have the character sheets without having to go out and pay collectible prices, because most times the West End game stuff is being sold as collectibles. So um, I went to school with the CEO of that company, Scott Palter, and always kept in touch with him until his passing back in 2012 or whatever it was. And I got all the material from that, and I got to meet Bill Smith and Greg Costelin and all Costigan, excuse me, and all the guys that worked on that. So I love that system, D6, especially Star Wars. Another one, another one I'd love to play. It's a West End Games. It's called. Uh, God, I'm so old and burned out. I forget this stuff, and I want to play it. But it's like Red Dawn. It's kind of a something Freedom, uh, made by West End Games. But anyway, it's like Twilight 2000, but it's a little bit more of a Hollywood um, type of vibe to the genre. It's more about action films and stuff like that than Twilight 2000, which is kind of a gritty, hardcore, realist. And I love to play that too. I'd love to get somebody to play Twilight 2000. Um, yeah, yeah, it had a real Hollywood bent to it. Most of their stuff does. They kind of had a real, cinematic flair to their RPGs. Thank you. Good. Come and play any of this stuff. I love it. I got Dave that was talking earlier. He's joined, and Rob Kuntz has joined, although he's never active. I don't know if Rob likes me very much. I think I kind of had a little. I mean, it wasn't an argument or a flame war, but I had some debates with him, and I said some things. I don't know, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just perceiving it as. But he's on there. I tried to get him to play Greyhawk with me once, and so there's quite a few people on there now. Um, but I got all sorts of good games. But yeah, the West End games that something for freedom. Yeah. Oh yeah, I love it. I love Star Wars and I love the system. Scott had to really kind of reel me in on it though, because um, I was playing Air Cav with them at school a lot. Air Cav and all those, they made a lot of really great war games. Air Cav was the one we played a lot of. Uh, there was one called Team Leader, Section Leader. We played that. It was kind of like a modern ASL. Uh, Played a lot of that kind of stuff. Yeah, Paranoia. I played with my doctor's son and I played Paranoia with a bunch of guys all the time. It was hilarious. That's a real good one. Absolutely. Um, I really, really love everything they put out. But yeah, Scott had to get me because I never liked the dice pool. I wasn't a bucket of dice person. So when he's like, "Oh, here you shake all these six setters," like I don't like that sort of stuff. But I looked at the material inside the books, and it was excellent, especially second edition, as far as the artwork and the editions. The second edition had all those glossy commercial spreads inside of it. Like used Tie fighters. You could buy a squadron of 12 and get the 13th for free for spare parts. They had a whole color spread astromech droid commercial in it. All the different things R2D2 could do, all the little extensions and all that stuff. They had a bunch of really good stuff like that. And of course the system is great. So once I kind of let my preconceived notions about dice pools drop and just went and played the game, it really was well done and a lot of fun. So what I do though, because I find a lot of people do get a little bit snarly at the big dice rolls and counting and all that, is when I do combat, I take the combat from the miniatures battle system, Star Wars Miniatures Battle by West End Games, which in and of itself is a phenomenally fun game. I played that at Gen Con a couple of times. It was a blast. But if you use their combat system in lieu of the one that comes with RPG, it really makes things faster. A little bit more bloody, but a lot faster to play out. So that's that was the one big modification I made. And I have a little bit more fleshed out ship battle, because it was kind of vague in the if capital ships get involved, it was kind of weird. The Price of Freedom, that's the one. Yeah, it had that Red Dawn vibe, but very very 80s infused, pulp culture references, yeah, yeah, I've been dying to play that. I played a lot more uh, Twilight 2000 than that one, because at the time I was playing Twilight 2000, I still had a bunch of people playing Micro Armor and stuff like that in the Twilight 2000 kind of dovetails with that kind of wargaming. Um, but Price of Freedom is just kind of fun. Another fun one, if you this one's a little different. Steve Jackson's Toon, where you play a cartoon character. We used to play that at Gen Con in Milwaukee. It would shut down just before midnight, but the bars would stay up until 2 and 2:30 on the weekends. So we would all go across the street. If you ever been to Wisconsin, pretty easy to find a bar. They're everywhere. So we would just walk across the street and go to this seedy bar, and we would play Toon, and we would start drinking and having fun, and we'd kind of play an adult version of it, and it was hilarious. And I'd love to do that again. Um, but it was definitely a rated R. I mean, it doesn't have to be now, but back then it was. Everybody tipping back beers and getting saucy and having fun. Yeah, it's not really meant to be a dirty adult game, but you flirt back enough beer, all of a sudden it starts to become very, very amusing. But it's just fun in general. But it has all those kind of um, uh, physics that you see in the old cartoon, like blow into your thumb and your fist gets big so you can whack people with it and stuff like that. There's a lot of imagination in how you operate your character, based on old cartoons and stuff like that. So that was fun. But that was our tradition. We didn't. Everybody else would go into like the hotel and sit around in the lobby and kind of loiter or play. Remember guys playing games even on the floor on the skywalk and stuff. And it was kind of crowded. And we'd go across the street to this bar and have a lot of fun doing that. That was another big one I played. So another one I played a lot of. I like war games, so I played war RPGs. It's really hard to get people to play those because I don't think people are like, well, what the hell's the point? It's just it's not like it can accrue wealth or anything like that. But we used to play Recon by Palladium, and we would play the advanced Recon, so we were like CIA ops and dealing with drug runners in South America and stuff like that. And then we would play Fascist Behind Enemy Lines, which is really a war game with some RPG stuff. Like you could play like it was meant to play behind the lines type of stuff mostly, although we would do frontline stuff too. But like if you watch old 60 war movies where Eagles Dare, Guns of Navarone, it was kind of that kind of vibe. And we would play that a lot too. And go knock out some 88s behind the lines so that the main force can get through and stuff like that. So there's another war game, war RPG that I think some people might be a little bit more amiable to because it's not hardcore technical. There's one for Combat, the old TV show Vic Morrow's Combat from the 60s. And the idea is it's not about war gaming per se, it's about putting on a good show. It breaks the fourth wall, and it explains you're sure you're in a World War II scenario, but it's a TV show. And the points you get in the game are about having a good plot and a good story. And the main characters have a lot of plot armor like they would in a TV show and stuff like that. And it's all about that's how they score it when you've played a game. So it's kind of a neat twist on gaming that would be fun to play. Right? Yeah. It was an old miniatures game. In fact, if you buy the original Recon, it came, or was it revised? Yeah, I had revised Recon. I had the one that it had the jungle, and there was a couple of Victor Charlie hiding in the back of the bush, and there was two GIs walking through. That that was the cover kind of, and it had the slick flying over. And I think that was the one that had the original um, miniature system in the back of it, because that's how it was built off of. And then there was the Advance, which that was the black one. Yeah, Advance was you could in Advance you were either in South America or you were in the Middle East, and you're supposed to be like kind of CIA. Yeah, yep. It was old percentile system. I like percentile systems. Easy. That was a fun one. Um, Oh, and the Star Trek, I've got the Star Trek one. Fastest Star Trek is fun. I like Fastest Star Trek because it's got the life path system. My system uses a life path to create characters. And I do that because I don't want novellas for backstories. And so I set it up so that the life path system, it lets people have a little bit of, if they want to add a little something to their character, this does it in a structured way. So instead of saying, "Hey, please don't give me something," or "Let's keep it limited to this," or whatever, it's all structured through the rules so that it doesn't give these these amateur novelists any room to dump their lore dump on me. And I kind of picked that up from the FASA life path system, which is fun for Star Trek, especially if you're a Klingon, because you might be killing your superiors, to attain rank right as you're going through your training and all that. So um, I think it's a neat system that way. So a lot of people don't want to play Star Trek because they say, well, if you play Star Trek, you can't fight because of the Prime Directive. But I says that's just a matter of the GM, you know, arranging the adventure properly to to deal with that issue. But but I had a lot of fun playing that one too. That's about all the RPGs that I probably played other ones. I played Boot Hill. I played some Gamma World, but not much of it. Star Frontiers a couple of times. These were games that I had that I just couldn't get anybody to play for whatever reason. They were all out or playing D&D or something like that. Right. Yeah, there's if you're just saying, well, you know what, Prime Directive, you can't fight. You're not. I think you're maybe missing some imagination because they found all sorts of ways to. Or you could just, like you say, you could just be TOS, just be like Kirk and just blow right through it. Just ignore it and go anyway. So I, mine's set up where you've got plenty of uh, adversaries to justify doing stuff with, things like that. But I really like the fastest system. I haven't played this Unicorn or whatever it is that came out uh, fairly recently. I got all the fastest stuff. Those are my big guys. I loved GDW, FASA, and West End Games. I mean, TSR, of course. I had all the TSR stuff, but those three companies were my favorites. West End Games probably the top favorite because they also made really great war games too. Um, they had the Ghostbusters RPG, which I only played once. I thought to myself, I don't know how much of this you could play. It'd be fun to play like a one shot, but how could you? I would think a campaign might get a little bit, um, long in the tooth as far as Ghostbusters. But they had that one, and then they had Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was really hard to do because um, it was hard to do Raiders of the Lost Ark without Indy, and you couldn't use Indy, and so it's kind of a mess. Um, uh, Another one that I never played that I always wanted to from TSR was the gangster one. What do they call that? Yeah, it was the 20 guy, the 20s with the zoot suits and whatever. I played Top Secret a couple of times. I'd love to play that again too. I think we could modernize that, put some modern spin on it, uh, but they had that gangster at TSR. The hell was it? Gangbusters. Yeah. I'd love to try that. That sounds like it would be fun. Yeah, yeah. I listened to a group from Canada that was playing it, and I listened to them, a little bit talking about it and what they were doing with it. And oh, I thought this sounds like fun. Yeah, yeah. I had that. That would be fun to play. I'd love to try that. Um, my dad has. We bought. My dad was a huge James Bond fan. You know, so we bought him some of the James Bond material from Victory Games. Victory Games, the old war game place. They made the James Bond RPG, and I just love to. I don't know how good. I've heard people say, "Well, it's hard to do James." The same like Raiders. It's hard to do James Bond if you don't have James Bond in it. But I thought, well, you don't have to all be 007. You could be 008 or whatever. So I'd love to give that one a ride too, just to try it. I'd have to buy some of it though. All I have is what we gave my dad, which was the M catalog. We just thought it was neat because he always liked the scenes with the gadgets and M and all, or Q. M was the leader. Q was the gadget guy. So we had that book. Um, but I could see doing some top secret stuff that was more modern. You know, tracking terrorists or whatever or something. But we played it back in the Cold War when it was all everybody was going, our stuff was all about the KGB and, the CIA and all that crap. So, yep. But and that leads me back to the Twilight 2000. I've never been able to get anybody to play that game, but I'd love to play it. I know some people play the modern fourth edition, but I don't. I want to play the old Mark Miller, you know, second edition stuff that's about the Cold War. I like to live in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. I was trying to what is another one? Dawn Patrol. No, no, people don't think of Dawn Patrol from TSR as being an RPG, but if you play a Dawn Patrol campaign, it's a lot like an RPG. You're gaining experience and you're getting medals, and the medals give you extra bonuses, and you have missions to complete, stuff like that. So I consider Dawn Patrol that, but I don't know if I'd ever get anybody interested in that one. It's World War One biplanes. And then there's one by Avalon Hill. There's two actually that would be fun to play if I could get people interested. Maybe I couldn't. One is about a Sherman tank crew, and the other one is about a B-17 crew. But I don't know. Oh yeah, yeah. That, I always thought, you know, finding a way to standardize stuff so you can make those conversions would be easier, would be a great thing. I like that. Used to do that kind of mixing up of stuff too. And that's why, again, that's why I have my system, because it allows for that happening. Some people are always saying, "Oh, I'd love to play this way, but I have to convert Savage Worlds to this and all that." I don't want to have to do all that, but yeah, that would be fun to do. Yeah, I never got to play enough of that TSR sci-fi stuff. I thought it was fun looking to do. I listened to Zeb Cook talk about um, Star Frontiers and the Star Wars debacle that that TSR went through. Yeah, that's the setup is the hard part. Um, there's a thing called Vassal that has a few family board games, but Vassal's mostly old man hardcore war games like Avalon Hill and SPI. Then there's Tabletop Simulator, but as the chances of finding one that is completely set up is it's possible, but a lot of times they're not. But I had it has Axis and Allies, and it starts all set up, everything pre-positioned and everything, which is really cool. So there's that one. There's also one called Tabletopia, um, but you have to pay like per game. It's like rent, like you have to pay per game or something. It's like putting a coin in the slot every time you want to play. Whereas Tabletop Simulator, you just buy the thing for 20 bucks and that's it. It just runs free. And I love it because it's all three-dimensional. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way. And that's it. That's why I love the percentile stuff. I know what people say about the uh, the bell curve and all that. And in some cases that's I think that matters, but in a lot of cases I don't, especially like combat. Like for war games, chaos. Anything can happen. Who cares if it's swingy or whatever, it can be completely random. So why not just use percentile? It's the easiest thing to conceive of. It's real simple to think, hey, what's my chances of succeeding? Well, about 70-80 or 70-80, Mr. Math there, about 80-20 or something, or 50-50 or whatever. Okay, that's easier than everything else. But um, but yeah, it gets difficult to make, you know, some of these changes. So that's why I like the idea of a GURPS like system. But I didn't want to do like, you know, GURPS is, have you ever seen the entirety of the GURPS system in one shelf? It's just Christ, it's like this. So I wanted something where it was a little less um, voluminous with information. That's why I made mine. So, and then we used to just make stuff up. If we didn't have rules for it, or the rules didn't seem like they worked or converted, we just sit around and make up our own stuff. Yeah, the last time I played any Cthulhu is when, and I don't even, God, this how many years ago, but when they were doing the Cthulhu for President stuff at Gen Con, like they were handing out like campaign stickers and stuff with Cthulhu for President. And I asked Sandy, and I think he said that was like third or fourth edition or whatever, but I forget what year. But that's the last time I played Cthulhu. I wouldn't mind doing that um, either. Yeah, it's just it almost becomes too much financially and just information wise. So what I did instead was I've got, you know, stuff for weapons and things, like all these games do, but not to the extent that, you know, that stuff did. Because you got a whole book of nothing but World War II small arms and tanks and all that. No, no, no. What I did is I set it up so that it's real easy to plug in any weapon or something that you want. Um, like it's almost like a unit editor in an old PC game or something like that. So you could take a monster or a weapon and go, okay, well, this is what I think it can do, or this is what I want it to do as far as magic stuff and all that, and stat it out for the game. Um, so DMs can add that stuff in real quick instead of having to pull it from other places or make it up or something like that to go through that sort of stuff. Yeah. Traveler, that's another one. I mean, that I Mongoose Traveler, all that stuff. I played the original old Mark Miller, you know, first edition Traveler and all that sort of stuff. I don't even know if I'd recognize. It seems like it's gone through so many changes, but that would be another one that I'd like to get to play. Um, I had a guy that was going to play it with me, um, and I haven't heard from him in about a year. Kind of bummed out. He was fun. He wanted to play, but I think he was going through some stuff with his wife and all that. I haven't heard from him yet, but he was all down to play Traveler old school. I'd love to do that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't like I played when Mark was at the table demoing it back in the day, way back. So um, I mean, I know the guys at Mongoose, or did know guys at Mongoose, but I that was years before they picked up Traveler. Yeah, I've been pretty good about keeping my stuff together, thankfully. But I Traveler's an exception to the rule. I never really had a lot of that stuff, but I did play it at cons. So, um, but yeah, that's one of those things that you can find it if you want to play it, online. That kind of stuff, the original stuff, is out there in some PDF form somewhere. So, um, then there's the old pocket. What was it? Metagaming. I think that was the name of the company that made those pocket games, and they had a couple of good RPGs in their little thing. What the hell was the name of that? Yeah, metagaming. Uh, and a couple of sci-fi RPGs that were fun. What the hell was the name of those? Ah, Warp War. That was kind of a war game, but they did well. They made Ogre too. That's right. But they had a couple of them were like kind of RPG ish. I'd love to play those too. Wizard and In the Labyrinth. That was the ones that were kind of RPGs that they made. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They used to come in bags. They were like the software I was talking about. They would come in these little bags, and they would just have an insert that was like the cover art, and then the rules were with it. They're from like uh, the late 70s, early 80s. Some of them are kind of board gameish too. I'd love to play those. There's a couple of them on that tabletop simulator I was talking about that you can play. Neat thing about the tabletop simulator program is if they don't have it, you can import it in there if you know how to make graphics and stuff like that, or you know how to do three-dimensional modeling. You can even import three-dimensional models into it. But there's a ton of people putting stuff into the tabletop simulator, so you've got all sorts of choices. I know they've got a lot of good board games. They got Talisman, all the Talisman stuff. There was a bunch. Oh, that's another one that I'd love to play again. Made by Games Workshop. Uh, is there anything on this planet I can remember tonight? Uh, Hero Quest. I'd love to play Hero Quest. And they've got Hero Quest on that too. Checking the shelfie. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah. See, that's one thing too, that I'd love to get back into. There's a lot of that kind of comedic stuff that you don't see a lot of anymore. And and that would be a real fun to play. Steve always had some of that kind of stuff. Yeah. It metagaming, it was called one was called micro games. I guess that was here, Steve Jackson. The other one was called pocket games. Yeah. Oh yeah. That would be fun. Yeah. Yeah. I had a bunch of stuff. I went over to a buddy's place. When we were kids, his parents were coming out of going out of town. So we had the place, oh yeah, party place to ourselves. And um, so I grabbed a stack of games that I wanted to bring over because they were going to be gone for some time. So we were just going to kind of camp out there and just make it a big. And we got T-boned on the way. We weren't even drinking or being stupid, but we got T-boned by some person. This guy lived on a hill that was blind. It was real steep, and you had to turn on the hill to get into the guy's driveway. And the risk was is people coming the other way wouldn't see you because it was so steep and blind. And sure shit, we got hit real hard. And it was a nice summer day. So the windows, it was a sedan, and I was in the back with my stuff, and the windows were down. And when that thing hit us, it ejected all my games out into the ditch in the woods, just like confetti, tons of war game chits and papers and cards and shit. Just and when the cops came, I am pissed, and and I had to tell them. I says, they said, "Why are you in what are you doing in there?" I was looking around trying to recover the stuff, and I said, "More money just blew out the back door of this shitty Buick than is in the dent that was caused by." Oh yeah, it was horrible. It was some crappy uh, Buick sedan. We didn't care about the car being dented, but big chunk of my collection just got launched. So I know what that is, having pieces of stuff missing and all that. But I never had Talisman that I recall ever owning it, um, but they do have it on the tabletop simulator. And if you have if you have rules in PDF, you can import the PDF into the tabletop simulator, and then you can read the rules while you play. And all the pieces are there, the cards and everything to move around. So that's pretty cool. I played a lot of that too I didn't play it so much at Gen Con, but there was a regular group that played at my friendly neighborhood store for a while. So I played a lot of Talisman there. Another one, um, this is a little bit more modern, probably from the 90s or whatever, but Space Hulk from Games Workshop or Blood Bowl. I'd love to play those. Blood Bowl is a hilarious concept, and Space Hulk is just a good, easy, fun kind of tactical strategy game. Um, but God, I would watch them play Blood Bowl at Gen Con and stuff like that, and it just looked hilarious. But only the old school stuff because they made it all cheesy and watered down when they made the modern one. So yeah, yeah, second edition. I had all of that stuff. We used to play that too. We would combine sets, so we'd have giant, maps on the floor of the living room and stuff like that. And yeah, those are fun. I had my Blood Angels and my Space Wolves, and my friend sold me some stuff, and it was a real odd chapter. I can't remember what chapter, but they painted that up in some pretty bizarre colors, and I had a squad of that chapter too. And um, and that was a real fun to play. And they've got some of that on. At least last time I looked, they had that on the tabletop. But Games Workshop has gone in there and tried to yank a lot of it, based on IP and all that. But they had the whole set. It was all three dimensional. Even the one set, even the hallways and everything were three dimensional. instead of that flat stuff that came with the game. Oh, it was real pretty. It was real pretty stuff. And you could get the Terminators and all that. Yeah, I had the old Terminators, the ones that had the command unit with the antenna on the back of it and all that, the plastic ones. I had a bunch of those too. So, um, used to play 40K, but only second edition and only for a while. Couldn't keep up with it. Couldn't keep up with the changes and or the money. So I gave up on that. But Space Hulk is a blast. Yeah. Hero Quest was the other one. I'd love to play some more of that. Um, they got some of that on the tabletop simulator. It's also in three dimensions. They got some modules for it and stuff like that. That's real fun too. Yeah. But there's a whole what's the one? The other one that would be hilarious to play at least once more is uh, it was made in like 1980. It was kind of a joke game, real like hardcore. What the hell was the name of that? It was had a was I think it was done in hell or whatever. The hell was the name of that? I just love to play that for fun. Yeah, the trick right with the I know what you're talking about. Yeah, 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 with the yeah, yeah. I remember those setups. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff too. There were um it wasn't the only one like that, but it was probably the best and most famous. Um, but I remember those old VHS games. Yeah. Yep, yep. Now, I don't think it's there anymore because they had an update that kind of broke that stuff. But Tabletop Simulator, what they had was um, it had an emulator that it looked like a tablet in the game, but it was and you could it would run a browser and it would also run WMV file, Windows media files and MP3s. And somebody had that Dragon Strike, and you could play the VHS tape. They had it converted to Windows media file. You could play it right on the table with the game. I don't know if that exists anymore. I think it got broken, but with the update. But yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, yeah. Um, I got all of the SSI stuff on Steam, but none of the multiplayer stuff works on Steam. And I wanted to play Fantasy Empires really bad with a group of people, but it doesn't work. Maybe I get the old version to play. I don't know if you ever had that one. That was that SSI war game. That was a good one. It also has Dragon Strike was TSR. Well, yeah, yeah. So it had stuff like that. There's another one. Dungeon. Never could always play Dungeon. I always thought that was fun to play. The original version of it. Yeah, Fantasy Empires was when everybody says domain game, that's what it was. It was just a digital domain game, and it was fought in Mistra, and it just they had um, the old basic Beckme looking map, but they was all divided into little sections like a risk board, and then you typical of those games, you had build a barracks and build a castle and build more units and stuff like that. It was pretty fun. Yeah, yeah. The best thing I ever did with Dungeon is I just took Beckme, and because I was playing with people that they just they weren't going to do AD&D. They said it was too much, so I took Beckme and I ran a dungeon crawl using the dungeon board and the cards, the treasure cards and the monster cards, but a party that had a little bit more detail than, than to just roll a six to hit or whatever it was in dungeon, and played it that way with a party. But instead of stocking the dungeon or using any of the tables, we just drew the cards, and then we would go run the encounter using the Beckme rules. We we love the hell out of that. I would do that again too. I'd run that. But just playing the game in general was always fun. Um, just kind of a beer and pretzels thing. That was the deal. People always talking about how complex games are. Okay, maybe, but we would play over the weekend, and we would play beer and pretzels on Friday because we were getting drunk. We were partying. We were kids. So we would play something light like Dungeon or Axis and Allies, or, you know, something of that nature, where we didn't have to put a lot of thought into it because we were getting tuned up with the brewskis. And then Saturday afternoon, because we were kids and we could bounce right back from getting loaded, then we'd go play something hardcore on Saturday afternoon, like Advanced Squad Leader or Dawn Patrol or Micro Armor or something like that. I love a beer and pretzels game just for social stuff. Yeah, yeah, it works great. It works great. There's a board game. There's a good board game for BattleTech if you like sci-fi, called that's very similar to that I'd love to play too. It's called Succession Wars, and it's like Axis and Allies but with BattleTech stuff. That's on there too. Everybody, each player is one of the inner sphere houses, and you get C bills, like fake money, just like Axis and Allies, to buy more mech units and stuff like that. That's a fun one too. Real easy to learn, simple rules and stuff. Like I say, just good beer and pretzel stuff. You don't, you know, that was a good one. No, okay, yeah, that was. Yeah, I loved Facet BattleTech. Bought it right off the bat. Played a lot of that. Um, see what else they got. Blue Max. I also love World War I biplane stuff, and they've got Blue Max and Dawn Patrol. I love that stuff. Um, those are kind of simple. Well, Dawn Patrol's not that simple, but Blue Max is pretty simple. There's not too much to that game. And I think of any other fun board game stuff. Um, well, the best board game I ever played, I used to own and I don't own anymore because it was one of the things that got damaged. But and you'll never, I'll never be able to get it back. There was a game made that was demoed at. This is the weirdest one ever. Was demoed at Gen Con in either '83 or '84, and it was called Nuclear Armageddon. And this guy that made it in his house, produced it himself, hand carved all the pieces. They were wooden. Well, there was three versions. There was a two-dimensional version that was cheap, and that was printed out stuff. And then there was two versions of three-dimensional. There's a mid-level and a deluxe level. And the mid-level, um, some of the stuff was 3D. It was like a giant game of Risk, but it was modern day. And it had a twist to it. They had Act of God cards, and they were hilarious, but they were all about what was going on politically at the time, 1984 Cold War, making fun of stuff, Reagan jokes and things like that. Absolutely hilarious. But what would happen is sometimes these active guard cards you'd accidentally launch a nuke or something. So you had battleships and submarines and oil derricks and czar bombs and regular nuclear bombs and surface to surface missiles. And all this stuff was carved and painted by the guy. in the three-dimensional version. It was a superb game, and then he took chalk to make the mushroom clouds, and then hand painted them, and they were three-dimensional. It was excellent, and I bought it. It was $100 in 1984, $100. That was big money, and I split it with three other people, and we lost it. This dude that made it, he ended up got busted for multiple murders. He was like a serial killer. It's on the whole story used to be on Board Game Geek. It might still be there, but they've got an entry for this game. And if I ever find anybody that has a copy for sale, it was the funnest game I've ever played. Really imaginative, and the board was made out of this particular material. I forget what it was. It was super sharp. If it tore, it would cut you like a razor. But it was nice and firm, and it would lay out flat, and it had a shiny black surface, and he hand painted all the sections of the globe on it with different colors. It was it was awesome. And I played it demoed at Gen Con with the guy. He was an all right guy. He was a little weird. He seemed to me. He had long white beard and dressed like he was uh, an old train uh, engineer. Looked like he should be shoveling coal into the machine. And then we found out later, we called looking to buy another copy. And I read this article that he was, oh yeah, it was a wild story. I thought, I sat and played 3 hours worth of game with this dude, and he turned out to, oh. But yeah, you can look it up on Board Game Geek. Nuclear Armageddon. What an excellent game. And I've often thought about trying to replicate it, but I I don't have I don't have really good comedic mind, so I never do the cards justice. And but God, they were just very clever and funny. But I love those kinds of games too. I was like a little something with a little humor to it to have some fun. There used to be more of that sort of stuff. That's why I like play Tune the RPG, because it's all about the yucks. Yeah, it's a wild story, man. But what a great game. All hand done. Yep. And it came in a big tube. I mean, the guy really did it. And yeah, but that was a long time ago, 1984. See if I can get a picture of it. And I still have the piece of the rules. Oh yeah, now they got more pictures. Yeah, yeah. There's there it is. Let me see. This thing to peek on me. Share screen. Yep. There it is. So there's all the plastic made stuff. See, it looks plastic. But the stuff I saw was wood. Um, but I don't know. Anyway, but they all look the same like that. That's the cover I had. There's a whole set of them. Wild. So, well, anyway, and then for a while, the guy had a wife, and she was still selling it. And I didn't know this till not too long ago, but even in 2005, guys were purchasing it. But now she's gone too. So there's no one to get them from. But oh, what a trip. Yeah, that was a great one. It was one of my favorites. So trying to think about another I had everything TSR because my uncle worked for TSR. So I had all the old TSR board games. Like another fun one, and these are war games though, but another fun one was they had Hunt for Red October and Red Storm Rising. These were two different games that you could put together. Because I liked old Tom Clancy novels and stuff like that. They've got that on the tabletop simulator. This is what tabletop simulator looks like. here's a little get the screen on. So here's a little encounter map for D&D. See if I can make it bigger. Yeah, there we go. That's kind of what it looks like. And it's all three-dimensional. And you use your mouse. Your mouse icon is a hand that grabs. So you click your left mouse button and it picks up the piece, and then you hold it and you move it to the new position. So it's kind of like a virtual three-dimensional system where you're sitting at this virtual table and your little fake arm moves around, and you actually pick up the dice. It's not like some automated thing where you just press a button. You pick up the dice and you shake them and they roll and they make the noise. They've got the sound effect and everything. It's really cool. It's my favorite way to play miniatures and board games remotely. And it's got the terrain, as you see, and all that sort of stuff. The only thing it doesn't do, and they've never fixed it, I sure wish they would update it, is it doesn't do slopes. Almost, you really can't get like war game terrain that has large hills on it or something like that. You can do like the geohex stuff that stacks on top of one another, but you can't get like, you remember the old woodland scenics stuff that they used to make miniatures out of, which you use the coping saw to make a nice smooth slope on it. They don't have any of that, but yeah, it looks really good. Oh yeah, and it's here's what let's see. There's one. Let's see the other one. But yeah, it's $20. It's super cheap. Here's the little. This is just the stuff that comes with the program. When you can go to their I'll show you this part. You can go to their website on Steam and download a ton more of this stuff. Where did it go? That's not what I was looking for. Access. Oh yeah. At one point they had Keep on the Borderlands. This went away. Somebody took it down, but they had the whole keep in 3 dimensions for this thing with miniatures. And it was awesome. It was the best model they made. But yeah, they got like modular dungeon terrain for it and everything. There's people playing D&D just with this, like it's a VTT. It's really neat. Yeah, here's one of their dungeons. This isn't even like their. Oh yeah, here we go. This one's great. They got giant modular dungeon terrain for it. I got to hit the button. That's right. Check it out. I'll get it right. I'll learn how to operate this thing yet. Here we go. There. That's
okay. I'm gonna go ahead and give it to Galdud. Galdud, you wake up. What's gonna happen, man?
Where the fuck I am?
So he gets up all like distraught, not knowing where the fuck he is, because he's never been in this area. You know,
so everything like that. Isn't that great? And it's got all the key. You can hide deck hands from other people, so like they can't see the card until you play it. You can even write down notes. It's got note cards, 3x5 note cards, and you can click on them and type, and it looks like you're writing on them. There's even character sheet for some of the D&D stuff that are PDF that you can fill in. So it has ways to conceal portions of the map so that you can have ambushes and stuff. I don't know why more people don't use it for VTT, because at $20 it does all of that sort of stuff, and you don't have to learn how to store information and all that. It's like being at an actual table. It's even got graph paper. You can draw a dungeon you're on, two-dimensionally if you want, with the graph paper. It's really a neat tool. I ran my Greyhawk campaign on it. It was fun. Yeah, yeah. I think that's what the guy was doing. But they've got all sorts of different maps for D&D, custom made stuff, and then there's a couple of campaigns. There's a couple of 5e products on it, but it's just a phenomenal system, and it's all three-dimensional. It looks really great. It even has miniatures that you can download for free and add to your games. Not everything works, when you get stuff made by people, they can screw it up, and or they don't know what they're doing. So sometimes you download it. It won't ruin your computer. It just won't load right. Okay, delete. Go find one that works right. But they've got scores of it. At one point I had armies of 40K downloaded by these people. Games Workshop came in and said, but they had them with the Rhino tanks and everything, and but the fantasy miniatures, nobody can really copyright that stuff because it's just made by people. Like, they're just using three-dimensional art programs to make the models. It's not like they're copying actual things. So there's Star Wars Armada. There's a lot of Star Wars miniatures on there. So far, that company hasn't come in and said no, but I ran my Star Wars campaign on it, and I had little rebel troopers and all sorts of stuff. God, it was great. It's a lot of fun. But it has all sorts of, let me give you, like, Axis and Allies, Talisman. What else? There was a dungeon on there, and it's all free. Once you pay the $20 to get the software, all this stuff just comes with it. You can just go through this whole catalog of stuff and download a bunch of stuff for free. Better have some extra hard drive space, but it's great. Stuff takes up a lot of memory because it's three-dimensional. So, but I fought a giant fantasy battle on it one time. Thousands of points. We had orcs versus humans, and like Bretonnian knights. We used a lot of Warhammer Bretonnian knights and other. Some of them were Teutonic knights that some guy had made for some medieval war game. So they had a big Roman Empire looking cavalry with the big yellow shields, like the Bavarians, and then all these orcs from Warhammer Fantasy, archer orcs and stuff like that, and big stands, and this giant fantasy battle. Chainmail, it used chainmail rules for it. It's really cool. So you look at that stuff and you go, I just paid $20 for this. If I would have bought this stuff in real life and painted it, it would have taken me a year to put together and paint, and it would have cost me thousands. So I think it's worth it. I live in an apartment, so even if I had the money for miniatures, I got no this is as good as it'll get. I don't, no room, but it's really fun. Oh, and it also has music and sound effects. And if you're really computer savvy, you can add in particle effects. So there, I went onto this one 5e table, and they had spell effects for everything, like magic missile. You press a button, and blue arrows would show up and then disappear, like they were being shot from the side of the wizard, and like silvery barbs would actually kind of spark out from the base when you clicked on your target. And so, oh man, I was like, this is fucking awesome. You got to have nice video card for it, and then it had the background noise. Like when you went down into the dungeon, you started hearing water dripping and stuff. Really, really immersive and cool. Right. I've got Yearlick Stormcaller from second edition 40K, and it doesn't have it. Never painted it. I've got it in the base, and it's still so same thing. But yeah, they've got all that sort of stuff. But the sound effects and everything, it's so awesome. You can have your own soundboard on it and everything. So that was a lot of fun. And I had a lot of fun playing my Star Wars on that. Even had the walker, the chicken walker, and the AT-AT was there, so we could use that. But it had tons of troopers and pirates and stuff. Yeah, it's a fun system. And what a steal for $20. Shit, even I could buy it. But it's on Steam and Steam only. So you got to go and download Steam and register for the account. That's the one drawback. You can't just buy the software outright. So if Steam's down, it's down, all that crap. That's the bad part. But it's fine. Oh, that would be fun to play too. That would be a good one. Yeah. The last time I brought that up to people, I got oh, that's too complicated. You'll never finish it. Oh, no, man, I want to play that. Yeah, that would be fun. What is what's the other one like that? Oh, the old Lord of the Rings. You ever see they've got that on tabletop too, and I've been looking to play that. The old Lord of the Rings war game by SPI from like 77 or whatever. That would be a fun one to try. War of the Ring. And that's a game that's got a little bit of both. You've got the war game part, and then you've got, the fellowship part. So it's got the role playing and the war gaming all on the same table at the same time. And one person plays like Saruman. One person controls the fellowship, and then everybody else just takes portions of the different, the good, the bad, and fight out the war. And that looked like fun. And they've got that on the tabletop. It was yeah, yeah. I think the biggest gripe I have is I think that there's a lot of people that kind of are over exaggerate the complexity of these things. And I think that a lot of people just assume a lot of stuff is very complicated because they've heard nothing but out of everybody who talks about this stuff. But a lot of it, if you sit down, it's surprising that if you really want to play it, most people will find that it's not, whatever it is, probably is a lot less difficult than it's made out to be. So the same thing with the Lord of the Rings thing I just talked about. As soon as they hear it coming from SPI, they go, "Oh, it must be this burdensome chore," because that's the war games from SPI tended to be thought of that way. But there's a lot of stuff out of that company that was super simple. In some cases, it was more simple than Avalon Hill. And this Lord of the Rings thing isn't complicated at all. But it's kind of neat. It's complex because it's got all these moving parts, sure. But you've got to, if you play with a group of people, it goes real smooth. But Divine Rights is, yeah, and they may have made it better as far as complexity when they remade it, because I know a lot of the original thing seemed like it was a task for people, but it sure looked like a lot of fun. I have the old Greyhawk Wars thing too, and that was another one people poo-pooed. And I know people don't like that lore very much about the wars, but it's kind of a fun little fantasy war game to play. But yeah, but you can put, and that's the other thing about the tabletop. Even if it's not in tabletop, you can put it in for free. If you can scan the map, and stuff like that, you can get it in there, and then you can play it with anybody. That's kind of a neat setup. Uh, yep. So I definitely play all that kind of old stuff. Yeah, it's just, you talk to Greyhawk Groganard or whatever that guy is, he kind of, I didn't like they kind of got an issue with the lore from that era, but it's just a neat little thematic war game to push around counters for and stuff like that. So, um, but yeah, what's another one? There's another one. I think a lot of, even though it's I guess technically a war game, it's really just kind of a board game from TSR. But I think a lot of RPG people might like it because it's a modern diplomacy type of thing. It's called Line in the Sand. It's about kind of about the Saddam Hussein 1991-ish type of thing. But it's got diplomacy, and everybody plays one of the nations. You play Egypt or Israel or Iran or Iraq or whatever, and there's all sorts of wheeler dealer stuff and diplomatic. Uh, you can make allies with other countries behind the back of other players and exchange messages with one another secretly, and so it's very much like diplomacy, but set in the Middle East instead of Europe. So that's why I think a lot of the RPG people would like that. It's real simple rules. It's on um, tabletop too, or at least it was. But it was made by TSR. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Those games are very simple. The 5/8 inch counters and that kind of deal. So those are fun. I love to play those kinds of things. Used to play a lot of that. Oh, there's another one for Star Trek people, Federation versus Empire. Yeah, remember that big monster of a game? That was Task Force Games came out with that like late 70s or early 80s, and it was like a whole section of the Star Trek galaxy. It was about that. I guess the original war that the Federation had with the Klingons or whatever. Um, but it was kind of like the strategic version of Starfleet battles. That was the one I bought recently. I went and I found somebody that had said they were going to sell um, Starfleet battles, and I didn't have my copy anymore. It was one of the things that flew out of that car. So when I bought it, the guy sold it to me in the box that also had Federation versus Empire. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. I want to try this one out. Um, there was another one that was even bigger than Federation, but Federation and Empire was a pretty big game. Not too big, but just pretty big. But there was another one I had that was even larger. It was just kind of this giant counter war game for Star Trek. I don't know. That might be one thing I don't have. I don't recall that one. It might, maybe I don't recall a lot at my age. I might had a lot of memory problems. I remember the cover of this thing, but I don't know that I if this is one I had or not. I remember my uncle having it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to try it. I don't know that I ever played it. That would be fun. But yeah, I like that kind of stuff where you don't have to, you can socialize as you play. Yeah. Yep. The 4X. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would be a fun one to try too. So you don't find that stuff. Well, they got it online. There's a lot of that. Starfire. Noble Knight has it for 50 bucks, 65 bucks for the base set. Huh. There was another one, Star Trek. It was really big. The hell was the name of that one? I can't remember. Anyway, but it was a big one. That'd be fun. There's a couple of fun little Star Trek board games that aren't. Well, there's the one from Milton Bradley. I don't know how fun that one is. It seemed like it might be a little too kiddie, but there's a couple other ones. Um, I have I have Settlers of Catan Star Trek version. And I've been trying to unload that game on people forever. Also, yeah, yeah, the Striker set. That was yeah, that was Mark. That was a good one. You could convert that to all sorts of other things too. I saw people doing like modern wargaming with that set of rules, and then other stuff like other sci-fi genres. It seemed like it was fairly malleable, um, the way those guys did it. Um, yeah, yep. The boarding actions too. That was fun. That was. I wish I would have had a copy of that for my Star Wars. It would have been fun to use that because there was a couple of times the rebels tried to steal a frigate from the Empire, and having that would have been a fun way to do it. I had to kind of improvise. But yeah, I remember that. That was Mark. Yep, those would be fun. There was another one, Hammers and Slammers. There was an old miniatures game called Dirt Side that was a fairly good kind of generic sci-fi system that you could apply to anything. Um, but I mostly played because I'm such a fanatic, as I keep saying, the Star Wars miniatures battle, which was like 1990s though. It was 90 or 91 that came out, but all this other stuff was way back. There was a metagaming one that I think was, well, there was Ogre, but there was another one too. Maybe they were the ones that made Hammers and Slammers. Then there was the FASA one, but that was too much. They had um, they had a couple ones. They had Centurion. Um, was Centurion the one with the tanks? And then there was another one that they made. Yeah, Centurion was the one with the tanks. That seemed like it was a little bit too much. But I saw a lot of people playing it at Gen Con. But you're not going to teach that at a weekend. As far as I remember, it's pretty significant. What's the other one that they made? It was about spaceships or something. Anyway, Renegade Legion. That was the one. That was a big deal. I remember why there was people buying miniatures for that and everything back in the time. Renegade Legion. That was it. You too, man. Nice hanging out with you. It's always nice to have a little company. I appreciate the conversation. Check you soon. Maybe we can get a game going. Have a good night.